The wine glass shattered against marble, deep red liquid, spreading like blood across white stone. In the hushed elegance of Manhattan's most exclusive restaurant, a billionaire's voice cut through crystal chandeliers and silk tablecloths. "You're nothing. Do you understand me? Nothing." The young waitress didn't flinch. She met his cold eyes with unexpected calm, her whisper somehow louder than his rage. "Then why do you work for me?" The room froze. He didn't know it yet, but those 7 words had just destroyed a billion-dollar empire. If you want to see how one moment of cruelty can unravel everything, stay until the end. Drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The November rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of Le Bernardier, each drop a tiny fist against glass that cost more per square foot than most people earned in a month. Inside, warmth and wealth insulated the elite from the storm. Candlelight flickered across tables dressed in cream linen. Soft piano music drifted from somewhere unseen. The air itself seemed expensive, perfumed with saffron and aged burgundy, and the particular scent of money that had forgotten what it was like to worry. Clara Bennett moved through this world like a ghost. Her hands, red from years of washing dishes in water too hot, carried a silver tray with the careful precision of someone who couldn't afford mistakes. The black uniform hung slightly loose on her thin frame. She'd lost weight these past months, though she barely noticed anymore. Her dark hair was pulled back so tightly it made her temples ache, but the manager insisted. Professional appearance. Always professional. She approached table 7 with practiced invisibility, the kind servers perfect when they learn that being noticed often means being criticized. "Your wine, Mr. Hendricks." The older gentleman nodded without looking up from his phone. Clara poured with steady hands, the Chateau Margaux breathing its $200 per glass promise into crystal. She'd learned the names of wines she'd never taste, learned to pronounce French regions she'd never see, learned to smile while people discussed their third homes and their children's trust funds. "Clara." The manager's voice was sharp behind her. "Table 12 needs water." She turned, already moving, already apologizing with her posture. Marcus Chen ran Le Bernardier with the warmth of a drill sergeant and the flexibility of concrete. He was good at his job, which meant he was good at extracting maximum performance from people who couldn't fight back. Table 12 was empty when she arrived with the water pitcher. She stood there, uncertain, until Marcus appeared beside her. "What are you doing?" "You said they needed..." "That was 5 minutes ago. They left. Do you have any idea how that looks?" His voice dropped lower, more dangerous. 3 tables tonight, Clara. You're handling 3 tables. That's all. And you still can't manage it. Her jaw tightened. "I'm doing my best." "Your best isn't good enough." He stepped closer, and she caught the smell of espresso and aftershave. "One more mistake tonight. Just one. And you're gone. Understood?" Clara nodded, her throat too tight for words. She understood perfectly. She'd understood for 3 months now, since the day she'd walked into this restaurant and asked for the worst-paying position they had. Since the day she'd traded her real life for this one, her real name for a fake resume, her real identity for a chance to see what her money actually did to people. The answer was turning out to be nothing good. "Excuse me," a woman's voice, sharp with impatience. "We've been waiting 20 minutes for bread." Clara turned to find a blonde woman in diamonds that caught the light like accusations. Table 8. She'd brought them bread 14 minutes ago, but she didn't say that. Instead, she smiled her professional smile and said, "I'll bring more right away." In the kitchen, she leaned against the wall for just a moment, letting herself feel the exhaustion. Her feet ached, her back ached. Everything ached in ways it never had when she'd spent her days in corner offices making decisions that moved markets. "You good?" Luis, one of the line cooks, glanced over while plating something that looked like art and probably cost like art too. "Fine." "You look like death." "Thanks, Luis. Really helpful." He grinned. "Just saying, you've been running around like the place is on fire." "It's Tuesday. This is nothing. Wait till Friday." Clara grabbed a basket of bread and headed back out, but Luis's words stayed with her. "This is nothing. For him, maybe. For the other servers who'd been doing this for years, building thick skin and learning to laugh at the casual cruelty of the wealthy. For her, it was everything. Every dismissive wave, every snapped finger, every conversation conducted around her as if she were furniture. It all added to the growing weight in her chest, the knowledge of what she was seeing, what she'd suspected but hadn't wanted to believe. The front doors opened, bringing a gust of cold air and something else. A change in the room's energy. Clara felt it before she saw him, the way conversations paused mid-sentence and glances shifted toward the entrance. Ethan Vale had arrived. She knew who he was, of course. Everyone did. Impossible not to, when his face appeared in business journals and tabloids with equal frequency. The boy genius who'd built a real estate empire by age 25. The ruthless CEO who'd turned a small development firm into a multi-billion-dollar juggernaut. The widower who'd somehow made tragedy look like strength, raising a young daughter alone while conquering Manhattan's skyline. He looked exactly like his photographs. Tall, sharp-featured, with dark hair starting to show silver at the temples, even though he was only 32. His suit probably cost what Clara's real self paid her actual employees for a month's work. He moved through the restaurant with the confidence of a man who'd never been told no and couldn't imagine why anyone would start now. Marcus practically materialized beside him, obsequious in a way Clara had never seen. "Mr. Vale, welcome back. Your usual table is ready?" The window table. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't glance at Marcus, his attention already scanning the dining room. "I'm expecting 3 others. When they arrive, send them straight over." "Of course, sir. And may I recommend—" "I'll look at the menu. Dismissal, clean and complete." Marcus nodded like he'd received a compliment and gestured toward the prime table by the window, the one that offered a view of the glittering city and cost an extra reservation fee that never appeared on any bill. Clara watched this exchange while refilling coffee at table 4, her hands moving on autopilot. She'd seen powerful men before. She was one, technically, though nobody in this room knew that. But there was something different about Ethan Vale. Something cold and certain, like he'd calculated the exact value of every person he encountered and found most of them wanting. "That's Clara's section," one of the other servers whispered to Marcus. Clara's stomach dropped. Marcus turned, his eyes finding her across the room. She saw the calculation happen in real time. His best server would normally handle the VIP, but his best server was handling the other high-value tables. Clara was competent enough, and it was only 3 tables, and Mr. Vale probably wouldn't even notice who brought his food. "Clara," Marcus called out, "table 1 is yours. Do not screw this up." She walked over, her professional mask firmly in place, and approached the table where Ethan Vale sat scrolling through his phone with the focused intensity of someone for whom every second translated to money. "Good evening, sir. Can I start you with something to drink while you wait for your party?" He didn't look up. "Whiskey, Macallan 25. "We have the Macallan 18. Then you don't have what I want, do you?" His eyes finally lifted, cold and gray as the November sky. "Call Daniel. He knows what I drink. He'll have it in the back." Daniel was the general manager. He appeared maybe once a week, spending most of his time at the restaurant group's other locations. Clara had met him exactly once. "I'm not sure." "I'm not asking you to be sure. I'm telling you to get him." Each word came out precise and hard. "Is that too complicated?" Heat rose in Clara's cheeks. "No, sir. I'll find him." She turned away, her hands trembling slightly. It was stupid, getting rattled by rudeness. She'd dealt with worse in her real life. Hostile board members, aggressive competitors, investors who thought her age and gender meant she'd be easy to manipulate. But somehow this felt different, more personal. Maybe because here, she had no power to push back. Daniel wasn't in the building. She found Marcus instead, explained the situation while he sighed like she'd asked him to perform surgery. "He always does this." "Fine. There's a bottle in Daniel's office. Bring it out, pour him 2 fingers, leave the bottle on the table. Do not spill, do not overpour, do not mess this up." The bottle sat in a locked cabinet. Marcus retrieved it with a key he wore on a chain, handling the whiskey like it might explode. Clara carried it back to table 1 on a small silver tray, her heart beating faster than it should. Ethan was talking on his phone now, rapid-fire sentences about projections and timelines and some problem in Brooklyn that needed to be handled immediately. He barely glanced up as Clara set down the crystal glass and poured exactly 2 fingers of amber liquid. "I don't care what the community board says. We own that land. We'll develop it however we want. If they don't like it, they can—" He paused, finally noticing Clara still standing there. "What? Is there anything else I can get you, sir?" His eyes narrowed slightly. "You're new." "I've been here 3 months. I've never seen you before." "I don't usually work this section." He looked at her then, really looked, and Clara felt herself being assessed and catalogued and dismissed in the space of a heartbeat. She'd seen that look before in business meetings. The look that said, "You're not important enough to remember." "Wine list," he said, returning to his phone call. She brought it, a leather-bound folder heavy with prestigious names and eye-watering prices. He flipped through it one-handed while talking, his attention divided among multiple threads of thought with the ease of someone who'd trained himself to work at 3 times normal speed. "The Chateau Latour 95, he said, cutting off his phone conversation mid-sentence. "Decant it now. My guest will be here in 20 minutes and it needs to breathe." Clara's mind raced. The 95 Latour was $1,200. It was also in the cellar, which only senior staff accessed. She'd need Marcus's approval, his key, his supervision probably. You'll need to do your job." He set down the phone, giving her his full attention now, and it was somehow worse than being ignored. "Is there a problem?" "No, sir. I'll take care of it." She found Marcus overseeing the kitchen pass, his expression already stressed. When she told him about the wine, he actually closed his eyes. Of course he ordered that. Of course. He grabbed his keys. "Come on." The cellar was temperature-controlled and hushed, bottles resting in individual slots like sleeping children. Marcus moved with practiced efficiency, pulling the Latour and handling it with reverence. "This bottle costs more than you make in 2 months," he said while they climbed back up the stairs. "Decant it slowly. No splashing. If you break the decanter, you'll be paying for it until next Christmas." Clara's hands were steadier than she expected when she returned to table 1 with the ancient bottle and crystal decanter. Ethan was still on his phone, but his guests had arrived. 2 men in expensive suits, and a woman in a dress that probably required its own insurance policy. She began to pour, tilting the bottle carefully, watching the dark wine flow into the decanter in a smooth stream. It was almost meditative, this small ritual of wealth. The wine caught the candlelight, deep red with hints of purple. 70-year-old grapes, transformed and preserved, worth more than most people's cars. "So the zoning meeting is Thursday," one of the men was saying. "We've got 3 board members locked in. The other 2 are wavering. They'll vote our way." Ethan's voice carried absolute certainty. "I've made sure of it." Clara's hand jerked slightly. Just slightly. But it was enough. A few drops of wine splashed onto the white tablecloth, deep red spreading into the fabric like a wound. The conversation stopped. Clara froze, the bottle still in her hand, watching those drops spread and knowing that this was bad. "What," Ethan said slowly, "did you just do?" "I'm so sorry, sir. I'll get, do you have any idea how much that wine costs?" His voice wasn't loud. That was somehow worse. It was perfectly controlled, each syllable enunciated with the precision of a surgeon making cuts. "I apologize. It was an accident. I'll bring club soda." "An accident." He laughed, short and sharp. "You spilled a $1,200 bottle of wine because you're clumsy and careless, and you think, 'Sorry, fixes it'?" The restaurant had gone quiet. Not silent. Music still played, conversation still murmured, but the quality of sound had changed. People were listening while pretending not to. Clara's face burned. "Sir, I really am." "How long have you worked here?" He cut her off, leaning back in his chair with the casual posture of someone settling in to enjoy himself. 3 months. 3 months. He looked at his guests, inviting them to share his disbelief. "She's been doing this for 3 months and still can't pour wine without making a mess." "Ethan," the woman said quietly, "it's just a few drops." "It's incompetence, Jessica. It's exactly the kind of sloppy, lazy work that—" He turned back to Clara. "What's your name?" "Clara." "Clara." He said it like a diagnosis. "Tell me, Clara, do you think your job is difficult?" She didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Her throat had closed up entirely. "I'm asking you a question," he continued. "Do you think being a waitress is hard work? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks pretty simple. Take orders, bring food, pour drinks without spilling them." He gestured at the stained tablecloth. "Apparently that last part is beyond your capabilities. Mr. Vale," Marcus had appeared, his face pale. "I sincerely apologize. We'll replace the wine immediately, of course, and there will be no charge for—" "I don't want a replacement. I wanted this bottle, properly served, not baptized across my table by someone who clearly doesn't belong here." Clara's hands had started shaking. She gripped the wine bottle tighter, focusing on that small point of control. Maybe, Ethan continued, his eyes still on Clara. You should consider a different line of work. Something that matches your skill level. Fast food, perhaps. They have pictures on the registers. That might be more your speed. Jessica shifted uncomfortably. One of the men coughed. Marcus looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. Clara stood there, burning with humiliation, and thought about all the things she could say, all the things she wanted to say. Instead, she said, I'll get a new tablecloth. No. Ethan's voice cracked like a whip. You'll stand there and explain to me why I should tip someone who can't perform the most basic function of her job. Something shifted in Clara's chest, a small spark of anger fighting through the shame. I made a mistake, she said quietly. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. Won't it? He leaned forward slightly. Because I'm looking at you, Clara, and I'm seeing someone who probably makes mistakes constantly, someone who drifts through life doing the bare minimum and expecting everyone else to clean up after her. Am I wrong? The spark caught fire. You don't know anything about me. The words came out before she could stop them. Marcus made a small, strangled sound. Ethan's eyebrows rose. Excuse me? You don't know me, Clara repeated, and this time her voice was steadier. You don't know if I work hard. You don't know what kind of person I am. You saw me spill a few drops of wine and decided you knew everything worth knowing. Clara! Marcus grabbed her arm, but she shook him off. I am sorry about the wine, she continued, looking directly at Ethan Vale, but I'm not sorry for being human. I'm not sorry for making one mistake after working a double shift. And I'm definitely not sorry for refusing to let you humiliate me just because you can. The silence was absolute now. Every conversation in the restaurant had stopped. Every eye was turned toward table 1. Ethan stood up slowly. He was tall, Clara realized, taller than she'd thought. He looked down at her with an expression that might have been surprise or might have been fury. Do you know who I am? Yes. Then you know I could have you fired with one phone call. I know you could try. Something flickered across his face. Try. Clara felt the words building in her chest. 3 months of silence and observation and carefully hidden identity rising up like a wave. She thought about the families in Brooklyn, the development project she'd been investigating. She thought about the fake numbers and the bribes and the lives that would be destroyed for profit. She thought about everything this man represented, standing there in his expensive suit, using his power to crush someone he thought couldn't fight back. You called me nothing, she said softly. You said I was lazy and incompetent and worthless. You decided all that from 3 drops of wine. I decided it from watching you fail at a simple task. No? Clara shook her head. You decided it because you think people like me don't matter, because you think money makes you better than everyone else, because you've forgotten, or maybe you never learned, that the people you dismiss as nothing are actually human beings with lives and problems and dignity. Ethan's jaw tightened. You're way out of line. Am I? She met his cold gray eyes with her own. Then fire me, Mr. Vale. Call the owner right now. Use your power. Prove that you're exactly the kind of man who destroys people for sport. For a long moment, he just stared at her. The restaurant held its breath. Then Ethan Vale smiled. It was not a nice smile. You want to know the truth, Clara? He spoke quietly, but his voice carried through the silent room. The truth is that you are nothing. In a city of 8 million people, you're completely replaceable. You'll be forgotten before the night is over. That's not cruelty. That's reality. You're upset because I'm the first person honest enough to say it to your face. The words hit like fists. Clara felt them land, felt them trying to burrow deep and make her small. But she'd been small for 3 months now. She'd made herself small deliberately, observing and learning and gathering evidence. She'd let people talk around her and through her and over her, collecting every careless word and casual cruelty. She was done being small. Then why, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Do you work for me? Ethan blinked. What? I asked you a question. Clara's voice was still quiet, but something had changed in it. Something cold and certain and final. If I'm nothing, Mr. Vale, if I'm so completely worthless and forgettable, then why do you work for me? He laughed, actually laughed. Are you having some kind of breakdown? I don't work for you. I don't even know you. No, Clara agreed. You don't. She reached up and pulled the elastic from her hair, letting it fall around her shoulders. It was a small gesture, meaningless to anyone watching, but to Clara, It felt like taking off a costume. "My name is Clara Bennett," she said. "I'm the chairwoman of Bennett Holdings. We own 42% of the venture capital firm that holds the majority stake in Vale Development Group." She paused, watching his face. "Which means, Mr. Vale, that I own you." The color drained from Ethan's face. "That's not—" He stopped, recalculating. "Bennett Holdings is managed by me," Clara finished, "through a series of trustees and shell corporations designed specifically to maintain anonymity. My father built the company. When he died 2 years ago, he left it to me with one instruction: figure out what our money actually does." She gestured around the restaurant, at the watching faces and expensive tables and the world of wealth they'd both inhabited from such different angles. "So I've been finding out. I've worked in 7 different companies that my money controls. Restaurants, retail stores, warehouses, construction sites. I wanted to see how people were treated when they thought nobody important was watching." Her eyes locked onto his. "Now I know." Ethan stood frozen. His mind was racing. Clara could see it in his eyes. Calculating, analyzing, trying to find the angle or the lie or the way out. Marcus had gone white as chalk. The other diners watched with the transfixed attention of people witnessing a car accident. "You're lying," Ethan said finally. Clara pulled out her phone, the cheap burner she'd been carrying for 3 months, and dialed a number from memory. "Elizabeth? It's me. I need you to send the full corporate structure documents to this address." She rattled off the restaurant's email. "The ones showing Bennett Holdings' stake in Meridian Capital? Yes, all of them. Now." She hung up and looked back at Ethan. "You'll have them in about 3 minutes. Feel free to verify." "Why?" The word came out harsh. "Why would you do this?" "Because I wanted to know the truth, not the sanitized reports from managers trying to impress me, not the carefully crafted presentations from executives protecting their bonuses. I wanted to see what actually happens to people in my companies." She pulled off her apron slowly, folding it with deliberate care. "And what happens, Mr. Vale, is that people like you treat them like nothing." Marcus found his voice. "Ms. Bennett, I had no idea if I'd known—" "If you'd known who I was, you would have treated me differently," Clara cut him off. "That's exactly the problem, Marcus. You should treat all your employees with basic human decency, not because they might secretly be wealthy, but because they're people." She turned back to Ethan. "Your development project in Brooklyn, the one you were just discussing. I've been reviewing the environmental assessments, the community impact statements, the relocation plans." She paused. "They're fraudulent. The numbers are fabricated. And starting tomorrow morning, Bennett Holdings will be launching a full investigation into Vale Development Group's business practices." Ethan's hands had curled into fists. "You can't—" "I can." Clara's voice was ice. "I absolutely can. You taught me an important lesson tonight, Mr. Vale. You showed me exactly what happens when power goes unchecked, when people think they can humiliate others without consequences." She picked up her purse from where she'd stashed it behind the bar. "Thank you for that. It was very educational." She started to walk away, then stopped and turned back. "One more thing. That bottle of wine, it didn't cost $1,200. It cost exactly $1,095. I know because I approved the purchasing budget for this restaurant." She glanced at the stained tablecloth. "And those few drops I spilled? They're worth about $8. But you were willing to destroy someone's dignity over them. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of man you are." The walk to the door felt endless. Clara kept her head high, aware of every eye following her, every whispered conversation starting up in her wake. Behind her, Ethan Vale stood motionless at table 1, his expensive suit and his power and his certainty suddenly revealed as fragile as the wine glass that had started everything. Clara pushed through the front doors into the cold November rain. It soaked through her uniform immediately, icy and sharp and real. She started laughing. It bubbled up from somewhere deep in her chest, a release of 3 months of tension and pretending and careful observation. She'd done it. She'd actually done it. Walked into her own company, worked the worst job she could find, endured everything from casual dismissal to outright cruelty. All to answer one simple question. What does my money do? Now she knew, and now she could do something about it. Her phone buzzed. Elizabeth, her actual assistant, the one who knew where Clara really was, who'd been managing the legitimate side of Bennett Holdings while Clara played waitress. "I sent the files," Elizabeth's text read. "Also, you're trending on Twitter. Someone filmed the whole thing. Hashtag Waitress Revenge is #3 nationally. Clara closed her eyes. Of course someone had filmed it. This was New York. Everyone had cameras. Everyone was always watching, always recording, always ready to turn private moments into public spectacle. Another text. Legal wants to know if you're ready to move forward with the Vail investigation. Clara typed back, yes, full audit, everything. She stood in the rain for another moment, letting herself feel the weight of what she'd just started. This wasn't just about Ethan Vail anymore. It was about every company her father's money touched, every person who worked in those companies, every life affected by decisions made in boardrooms by people who'd never gotten their hands dirty. Tomorrow, she'd go back to being Clara Bennett, billionaire heiress and company chairwoman. She'd put on her expensive suits and sit in her corner office and make the kinds of decisions that moved markets. But tonight, she was just Clara. Just a woman who'd spilled some wine and refused to accept being called nothing. She hailed a cab, her wet uniform clinging uncomfortably, and gave the driver her real address, the penthouse apartment she hadn't seen in 3 months. As the city lights blurred past the rain-streaked windows, Clara thought about Ethan Vail's face in that final moment. The shock, yes. The anger, definitely. But underneath it all, something else. Fear. He was afraid because his whole world had just shifted beneath his feet. Because the person he'd dismissed as worthless had revealed herself as the one person who could destroy everything he'd built. Clara didn't feel triumphant exactly. She felt tired and cold and oddly sad. Because the truth was, she'd liked being invisible. She'd learned more in 3 months as a waitress than in 2 years running a billion-dollar company. She'd seen how the world actually worked, stripped of all the polite lies that wealth allowed people to tell themselves. The cab pulled up to her building. The doorman's eyes widened when he saw her dripping uniform, but he recovered quickly. Miss Bennett, welcome home. Thanks, Robert. Her apartment was exactly as she'd left it, spotless, expensive, and empty. The city sprawled below her windows, 8 million lives playing out in apartments and offices and restaurants just like Le Bernardier. Clara stood at the window, still wearing her wet uniform, and made herself a promise. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Ethan Vail had shown her the disease. Now she was going to find the cure, even if it meant burning down everything her father had built and starting over from ashes. She pulled out her real phone, the one with all her actual contacts, and started making calls. James? It's Clara. I need you to pull every file we have on Vail Development Group. Every contract, every deal, every piece of paper with Ethan Vail's signature on it. She paused. Because we're going to war. The video hit 2 million views before Clara even finished her shower. She stood in her bathroom wrapped in a towel, water still dripping from her hair, watching herself on a stranger's phone screen. The angle was bad, shot from 3 tables away, shaky and partially obscured, but the audio was crystal clear. Then why do you work for me? Her own voice, quiet and certain, cutting through Ethan Vail's arrogance like a scalpel. The camera caught his face perfectly in that moment. The shock, the confusion, the slow dawning horror as she explained exactly who she was. The comments section was a war zone. Queen Energy. This is fake, no way. I looked it up. Bennett Holdings is real, and she's really the chairwoman. Holy shit. That guy is finished. Clara closed the app and set her phone face down on the marble counter. Her hands were shaking again, but this time from adrenaline rather than fear. She'd done it. Burned her cover completely, transformed from invisible observer to very visible threat in the span of 5 minutes. There was no going back now. Her phone rang. Elizabeth. Please tell me you've seen the video, Elizabeth said without preamble. I've seen it. Okay. Good. Because we're getting calls from every media outlet in the country. Bloomberg wants an exclusive. The Times wants to run a profile. Someone from the Wall Street Journal called me 3 times asking if you're planning a hostile takeover of Vail Development. Clara sat down on the edge of her bathtub. What did you tell them? I told them all to go to hell very politely. Elizabeth's voice softened slightly. Are you okay? Really? I don't know yet. Fair enough. Papers rustled in the background. Legal team is assembled and ready. James pulled every Vail file we have. Turns out there's a lot. The preliminary audit shows some interesting discrepancies in their Brooklyn project. How interesting? Interesting enough that I've already drafted a letter to the SEC. Clara closed her eyes. This was happening, really happening. In one night, she'd gone from anonymous waitress to the woman who might destroy one of New York's most powerful developers. Schedule a board meeting, she said. Full board. Day after tomorrow. That's Thanksgiving.
I don't care. Everyone's in town for the holiday anyway. Tell them it's mandatory.
Clara stood up, already planning. And Elizabeth? I need everything we have on the Riverside project. Community surveys, environmental reports, relocation data, everything. The Riverside project is Vail's flagship development. If we go after that, we're going after all of it, Clara cut her off. Every project, every deal, every corner they cut. I want to know exactly what my money has been funding. She hung up and looked at herself in the mirror. Her face was pale, her eyes tired. She looked like someone who'd worked a double shift and then blown up her entire life. Good. Clara got dressed in real clothes for the first time in 3 months. Dark jeans, a cashmere sweater, boots that cost more than she'd made in tips all week. It felt strange sliding back into this skin, like putting on armor after walking around naked. Her laptop was still on the kitchen counter where she'd left it, buried under 3 months of dust. She opened it and pulled up the files James had sent. Vail Development Group, founded 8 years ago by Ethan Vail using a combination of family money and leveraged investments. Grew rapidly through aggressive acquisitions and bold projects that other developers considered too risky. Current valuation, somewhere north of $3 billion. And 42% of the venture capital firm holding Vail's largest debt was owned by Bennett Holdings. Which meant Clara didn't own Ethan Vail, not exactly, but she owned enough of the people he owed money to that she could make his life very, very difficult. She scrolled through project files, seeing the pattern immediately. Vail specialized in buying up struggling neighborhoods, promising revitalization and community partnership, then building luxury developments that pushed out everyone who'd lived there before. It was gentrification as corporate strategy, wrapped in the language of progress and economic growth. The Riverside project was his masterpiece. 2 square blocks in Brooklyn, currently home to about 300 families in rent-controlled buildings and small businesses that had survived 3 generations. Vail's plan would demolish it all and replace it with high-rise condos, boutique retail, and a private park. Clara found the community impact statement and started reading. Within 2 pages, she knew something was wrong. The relocation numbers didn't add up. The report claimed only 85 families would be displaced, but Clara had seen the neighborhood layout. She'd actually driven through it last month, part of her ongoing investigation. There were at least 200 residential units in those 2 blocks. She pulled up the environmental assessment next. It claimed minimal impact on local infrastructure, no concerns about increased traffic or strain on schools and services. But the census data told a different story. The neighborhood had 2 elementary schools already operating over capacity. The subway station was among the most crowded in Brooklyn. Adding 1,500 luxury units would be a disaster. Someone had lied. Professionally, systematically, with official stamps and signatures that made it look legitimate. Clara's phone buzzed again. A text from a number she didn't recognize. Ms. Bennett, this is Marcus Chen from Le Bernardier. I wanted to apologize for my behavior tonight and for not recognizing who you were. If there's anything I can do to make this right. She deleted it without responding. Another text, this one from her college roommate. OMG, I just saw the video, are you okay? And another from her lawyer. We need to talk about the NDA implications before you make any more public statements. Clara turned off her phone. She needed to think, needed to plan, needed to understand exactly what she was dealing with before she made her next move. The Riverside project file had appendices, hundreds of pages of supporting documents, surveys, architectural renderings. Clara downloaded everything and started printing. Her home printer wheezed to life, spitting out page after page while she made coffee and tried to organize her thoughts. Outside her windows, the city glittered with oblivious beauty. Somewhere out there, Ethan Vail was probably having a similar night, planning, strategizing, trying to figure out how to neutralize the threat she represented. Good. Let him worry. The printer finally stopped around 2 in the morning. Clara spread the documents across her dining room table, creating a physical map of Vail's deception. Environmental reports here, relocation data there, financial projections forming a third pile. That's when she found it. A single page buried in the appendix, easy to miss if you weren't looking carefully. A preliminary survey from 2 years ago, before Vail had bought the land. It showed the actual number of residential units, 243 families plus 32 small businesses. Someone had made those numbers disappear. Clara pulled up the official impact statement again and compared the signatures.
The preliminary survey was signed by a company called Northfield Environmental Consulting. The final assessment, the fraudulent one, was signed by Apex Environmental Group.
A quick search showed that Apex Environmental had been incorporated 6 months after the preliminary survey, had worked exclusively on Vail development projects, and shared an office address with 3 other consulting firms that also worked exclusively for Vail. Shell companies. All of them. Clara sat back, her mind racing. This wasn't just cutting corners or optimistic projections. This was systematic fraud designed to circumvent environmental and community protection laws. And she had the proof. Her phone was still off, but her laptop showed 53 new emails. She ignored them all and opened a new message to James. I need a forensic accountant and a team of lawyers who specialize in real estate fraud. Also, find me everything you can on Northfield Environmental Consulting, the firm that did the original Riverside survey. I want to know who paid them to disappear. She hit send and checked the time. Almost 3 in the morning. She should sleep. She'd been awake for 20 hours, worked a double shift, confronted a billionaire, and started a war. Instead, she made more coffee and kept reading. The architectural renderings for Riverside were beautiful in the way that lies often are. Green spaces and community centers, diverse families laughing in sunlit courtyards, small shops with cheerful awnings. The images promised integration and improvement, a rising tide lifting all boats. But the fine print told a different story. The affordable housing component was only 12% of total units, the bare minimum required by law. And those units weren't actually affordable by any reasonable standard. A 1-bedroom listed at $2,400 a month, in a neighborhood where the median income was $40,000 a year. Clara pulled up a map of the area and started researching. The Riverside neighborhood had been there for over 100 years. Started as a working-class community for dock workers and factory employees. Survived the Depression, white flight, crack epidemic, and every other crisis that had torn through Brooklyn over the decades. Now it was being erased so people like her could have luxury condos with river views. The irony wasn't lost on Clara. She was wealthy enough to afford one of those condos without blinking. Hell, she could probably buy the entire building. But she'd also spent 3 months making $8 an hour plus tips, sharing a locker room with women who worked 2 jobs and still couldn't make rent. She knew which version of herself she preferred. Her laptop pinged. James had replied already. The man apparently never slept. Forensic team assembled. Lead is Rebecca Stein, formerly with the FBI's white-collar division. Very expensive, very good. Lawyers are from Hutchins and Gray. They handled the Delacroix fraud case. Also very expensive. Also very good. And then FYI, Ethan Vail just retained Morrison and Wells. They're the best defense firm in the city. Clara smiled grimly. So Vail was gearing up for war too. Another email from James. Northfield Environmental was paid $50,000 for the preliminary survey. Then they received $200,000 3 months later marked as consulting fees from a holding company that traces back to Vail. 1 month after that, the company dissolved. So Vail had paid them to go away, paid them enough that the truth would stay buried. Clara forwarded everything to Rebecca Stein with a simple message. I need to know how deep this goes. The sun was starting to rise, pale November light filtering through her windows. Clara stood and stretched, her back aching from hours hunched over documents. Her phone was still off. The real world could wait a few more hours. She made breakfast, actual breakfast, scrambled eggs and toast, not the granola bars and coffee she'd been living on for months. Sat at her table, surrounded by evidence of fraud, and ate slowly, methodically, thinking about what came next. The board meeting would be the first test. She'd have to convince 12 very wealthy, very conservative investors that going after Vail Development was worth the risk. Some of them were friends with Ethan. Some of them had probably used his services. All of them would question whether this was about justice or revenge. Clara didn't care what they thought. She had the votes. Bennett Holdings was hers completely. Her father had made sure of that. The board was advisory, not controlling, but she'd need them on her side if this was going to work. Her laptop pinged again. Elizabeth, working Thanksgiving morning, apparently. Media requests are up to 200. Also, you're getting threats on social media. I forwarded everything to security. They want to increase your detail. Clara typed back, no increased security, but monitor the threats and alert me if anything looks credible. She finally turned her phone back on. It immediately started buzzing with notifications, a 3-hour backlog of messages and calls and emails. Most of it was noise. Reporters, curiosity seekers, people she hadn't talked to in years suddenly very interested in her life. But one message stood out. It was from a number with a Brooklyn area code. Ms. Bennett, my name is Rita Morales. I live in the Riverside neighborhood. I saw what happened at the restaurant. If you really want to help us, we need to talk. Clara stared at that message for a long moment. This was it. The other side of the documents and legal battles. The actual human beings whose lives would be destroyed if Vale's project went through. She typed back, when and where. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow, 2 p.m. Rosa's Cafe on Riverside Drive. I'll be the one who looks like she hasn't slept in 6 months. Clara smiled despite herself. I'll be there. She spent the rest of the morning preparing for the board meeting, organized the documents into a presentation that even the most disinterested investor couldn't ignore, created charts showing the discrepancies, timelines mapping the fraud, financial projections demonstrating how much this could cost Vale, and by extension, how much leverage they had. By noon, she had a case that could bury Ethan Vale's entire company. The question was whether she actually wanted to do it. Clara stood at her window again, looking down at the city. From up here, it looked manageable, orderly, like something that could be controlled and directed and fixed. But she'd spent 3 months down there in the streets, and she knew the truth. The city was chaos. Millions of people making millions of decisions every day, creating patterns too complex for any one person to manage. All she could do was try to make her little corner of it less terrible. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. Clara Bennett? Miss Bennett? The voice was male, professional, controlled. My name is Richard Morrison. I represent Ethan Vale. My client would like to arrange a meeting to discuss the situation. What situation is that? A pause. The allegations you've made regarding the Riverside project. I haven't made any allegations. Yet. Nevertheless, Mr. Vale feels that a conversation might be productive. He's willing to meet at a time and place of your choosing. Clara almost laughed. Ethan Vale, who'd called her nothing 12 hours ago, was now requesting a meeting like she was someone who mattered. Tell Mr. Vale I'm not interested in talking. I'm interested in seeing his financial records and construction permits. Ms. Bennett, I understand you're upset about what happened at the restaurant. This isn't about the restaurant. Clara's voice went cold. This is about fraud. This is about displacing 300 families based on falsified environmental assessments. This is about your client breaking the law and assuming no one would notice. Morrison's tone shifted, became harder. Those are serious accusations. I assume you have evidence to support them? I have enough? Then perhaps we should let the courts decide. Perhaps we should. Clara hung up. Her hands were shaking again, not from fear this time, from anger. From the sheer audacity of these people, thinking they could make this go away with a phone call and some legal maneuvering. Elizabeth called 30 seconds later. Morrison and Wells just sent over a cease and desist. They're threatening to sue for defamation if you make any public statements about Vale or the Riverside project. Let them sue. Clara, I'm serious. Let them sue. Discovery will give us access to all their internal communications. They won't risk it. Elizabeth was quiet for a moment. You've really thought this through. I've had 3 months to think about it. Clara grabbed her coat. I'm going out. If anyone else calls, tell them I'm unavailable. Where are you going? Brooklyn. She hung up before Elizabeth could ask more questions. The drive to Riverside took 40 minutes through Thanksgiving traffic. Clara had rented a car, something anonymous and practical, not the town car service she normally used. She wanted to see the neighborhood the way its residents saw it, not through tinted windows from the back seat. Riverside was exactly what the documents had described. Working class, diverse, tired but surviving. Corner stores with Spanish signs. A laundromat with people folding clothes in the window. Kids playing basketball on a court with a bent rim and no net. These were the people Ethan Vale wanted to erase. Clara parked and walked. The November wind cut through her coat, carrying the smell of someone cooking sofrito and the distant sound of a subway train. She passed a barbershop full of old men arguing about football, a bodega with produce spilling onto the sidewalk, a church with a broken window covered in plywood. This wasn't the poverty tourists imagined when they thought about struggling neighborhoods. It was just life. People getting by, making communities, existing in the complicated space between prosperity and desperation. And Vale wanted to turn it into luxury condos. Clara found Rosa's Cafe easily, a small Puerto Rican restaurant with plastic tables and salsa music playing from a radio. She was a day early, but she wanted to see the place, get a feel for it before her meeting with Rita Morales. The woman behind the counter looked up when Clara entered. She was maybe 60, with gray hair and hands that had worked hard for a long time. "You're here about the development," she said. "Not a question." Clara nodded slowly. "How did you know?" "Because you got the same look everyone else has when they come here. Like you're trying to understand something you already know is going to disappear." The woman wiped down the counter with a rag that had seen better days. "You want coffee? Please." The coffee came in a foam cup, strong and sweet. Clara sat at one of the plastic tables and the woman joined her. "I'm Rosa," she said. "This is my place. Been here 32 years. Clara." "I know who you are." Rosa's smile was tired. "Saw the video. Everybody saw the video. You really humiliated that veil man on purpose?" "Not exactly on purpose, but I'm not sorry about it." "Good." Rosa sipped her own coffee. "He came here once, about a year ago. Walked through like he was touring a museum. Took pictures, asked questions, wrote things down. Then he left and we never saw him again." "What kind of questions?" "How long we'd been here, how much rent we paid, whether we owned or leased." Rosa's eyes hardened. "He was counting, figuring out how much it would cost to make us all go away." Clara set down her cup carefully. "What if I told you I could stop him? I'd say you're either lying or you don't know what you're up against." Rosa leaned back in her chair. "People like Vale, they don't stop. They just find new ways to win. You think you're the first person to try to fight this? We've had lawyers, community organizers, even a city councilman on our side. None of it mattered." "This is different." "How?" "Because I own the money he borrowed to buy your neighborhood." Rosa studied her for a long moment. "You really Clara Bennett, the chairwoman?" "Yes." "And you really worked as a waitress for 3 months?" "Yes." "Why?" Clara had been asked that question a dozen times in the past day. By Elizabeth, by James, by her lawyer. She'd given them all professional answers about corporate oversight and fiduciary responsibility. But sitting here in Rosa's cafe, drinking coffee from a foam cup, she told the truth. "Because my father died and left me $4 billion, and I didn't know what to do with it." Rosa laughed, a short bark of sound. "Most people would figure that out pretty quick." "I'm not most people," Clara smiled slightly. "My father built Bennett Holdings from nothing, worked 80-hour weeks, sacrificed everything, made himself into someone who mattered. And then he died and left it all to me, a 28-year-old who'd never worked a real job in her life. So you went and got one." "I went and got 7. Clara counted them off on her fingers. "Warehouse worker, retail clerk, janitor, call center operator, home health aide, fast food worker, waitress. I spent 3 months at each one. Tried to understand what it was like to live on the wages my companies paid." "And what did you learn?" "That I'd been funding misery." The words came out harder than Clara intended. "That every efficiency my father created, every cost he cut, every regulation he worked around, all of it just meant someone like you worked longer hours for less money with no security and no hope of anything better." Rosa nodded slowly. "So now what? You gonna save us?" "I'm gonna try. Try doesn't feed my grandkids. Try doesn't keep me from losing the business my husband and I built over 3 decades. Rosa stood up, suddenly angry. "You rich people, you think you can just swoop in and fix everything because you feel guilty about your money. But you know what? We don't need your guilt. We need our homes. We need our community. We need to be left alone." Clara stood too. "I understand." "No, you don't." Rosa's voice cracked. "You can't understand. Because when this is over, you go back to your penthouse and your billions and your comfortable life. We're the ones who have to live with whatever happens." They stood there in silence, the salsa music playing on, the coffee going cold in foam cups. "You're right," Clara said finally. "I don't understand. I can't, but I can listen. And I can use what I have, the money, the power, all of it, to fight this. Not because I think it makes me a hero, because it's the only thing I know how to do." Rosa's anger deflated slightly. "Rita called you. She texted me. We're meeting tomorrow. Rita's my daughter." Rosa sat back down heavily. "She's been organizing the resistance, going to community meetings, filing petitions, trying to get people to fight back. But we're tired, Ms. Bennett. We've been fighting for so long." Clara sat down across from her. "Tell me what you need." "We need time. We need the project delayed long enough to find another solution. We need someone who can actually stop Vale, not just slow him down. I can do that. Can you? Rosa's eyes were sharp. Because that man has lawyers and politicians and money. He's got permits and approvals and the law on his side. What do you have? Clara thought about the documents spread across her dining room table. The evidence of fraud, the falsified surveys, the shell companies created to hide the truth. I have the truth, she said, and I have enough money to make sure people listen to it. Rosa studied her for another long moment. Then she stood up and went behind the counter, returning with a worn manila folder. This is everything we've gathered. Pictures of the neighborhood, lists of families who will be displaced, letters from businesses that'll close. Rita put it together, thought maybe someone would care. She handed it to Clara. Show it to your lawyers. Show it to whoever needs to see it. Make them understand that this isn't just real estate. This is people's lives.
Clara took the folder carefully. I will. And Ms. Bennett? Rosa's voice softened. That thing you did at the restaurant, standing up to that man, it gave people hope. Don't make us regret hoping. Clara drove back to Manhattan with the folder on her passenger seat and Rosa's words echoing in her head. Don't make us regret hoping.
That was the real weight of what she'd started. Not the legal battles or the media attention or even the threat to Vale's empire. It was the hope. The possibility that maybe, just maybe, things could be different. And if she failed, she wouldn't just lose a business fight. She'd prove to people like Rosa and Rita that the system really was rigged, that power always won, that hoping was for suckers. Clara couldn't let that happen. Back at her apartment, she opened Rita's folder and found a community that Vale's sanitized reports had completely erased. Photos of birthday parties in 2 small apartments, block parties with folding tables in the street, kids doing homework at kitchen tables, lists of families, the Johnsons who'd lived in 2B for 40 years, the Patels who ran the corner store, the Martinez family with 3 generations in one building. These weren't statistics, these were people. Clara added the photos to her presentation for the board meeting, made them the first thing anyone would see when she started talking. Her phone buzzed. Elizabeth again. Morrison and Wells escalated. They're threatening an injunction if you make any public statements about Vale. Clara typed back. Let me know when they actually file. Until then, ignore them. Another text. This one from Rebecca Stein. Preliminary analysis complete. You were right. The fraud goes deeper than the environmental assessments. I'm finding discrepancies in construction permits, safety inspections, even the financing documents. This is systemic. Clara called her immediately. How bad is it? Rebecca's voice was crisp, professional. Bad enough that Vale could face criminal charges if this goes to the DA. We're talking fraud, bribery, possibly racketeering if we can prove a pattern. Can you prove it? Given enough time and resources? Absolutely. Papers rustled. But Clara, you need to understand what you're starting. This won't just hurt Vale. It'll expose everyone who worked with him, everyone who looked the other way, everyone who profited from these projects. You're going to make a lot of powerful people very angry. Good. Rebecca laughed. I was hoping you'd say that. I'll have a full report ready by tomorrow. Clara spent the rest of the evening preparing. She rehearsed her presentation, anticipated questions, built contingencies for every possible objection the board might raise. By midnight, she was ready. Her phone buzzed one last time, a text from the same Brooklyn number. Ms. Bennett, this is Rita. My mother told me you came by the cafe. Thank you. I know you don't owe us anything, but if you really mean what you said about stopping Vale, we'll stand with you, all of us, whatever it takes. Clara read that message 3 times, whatever it takes. She thought about Ethan Vale, probably in his own penthouse somewhere, surrounded by his own lawyers and strategists. Thought about the board meeting tomorrow, the media circus that would follow, the legal battles that would stretch on for months or years. Thought about Rita and Rosa and 300 families waiting to see if hope was just another thing rich people could afford and poor people couldn't. Clara typed back, I mean it. See you tomorrow at 2. Then she turned off her phone, made one more cup of coffee, and got back to work. Because this was just the beginning. The board meeting started exactly on time, which meant half the members were still arriving when Clara walked into the conference room. Bennett Holdings kept its headquarters in a modernist tower in Midtown, all glass and steel, and the kind of aggressive minimalism that screamed money without having to say a word. The 23rd floor conference room had views that stretched to the Hudson, furniture that cost more than cars, and 12 very wealthy people who were giving up their Thanksgiving to find out why their chairwoman had declared war on a billionaire. Clara set her laptop on the table and waited while they filed in. Some she knew well, her father's old partners, investors who'd been with Bennett Holdings since the beginning. Others were newer additions, brought on after her father's death to provide expertise she supposedly lacked. Walter Chen was first to speak. 73 years old, sharp as broken glass, he'd made his first million in textiles before Clara was born. "I assume this is about the restaurant incident," he said, settling into his chair with the careful movements of someone whose back hurt constantly but refused to acknowledge it. "Partly," Clara said. "The video has 9 million views now. This from Jennifer Park, the youngest board member at 46. My daughter sent it to me 3 times. She thinks you're a hero." "I'm not a hero. I'm someone who got tired of being treated like garbage. And now you want to destroy Ethan Vale's company in retaliation." Walter's voice was flat. "That's what this meeting is about, isn't it?" Clara opened her laptop and connected it to the room's display screen. The first image that appeared was from Rita's folder, a photo of the Riverside neighborhood taken from someone's fire escape. Kids playing in the street, laundry hanging between buildings, a bodega with a hand-painted sign. "This is what Vale Development wants to demolish," she said. 243 families, 32 small businesses, a community that's been there for over a century. She clicked to the next slide. The architectural rendering for Vale's luxury development, all gleaming glass and manicured green space. This is what they want to replace it with, condos starting at $1.2 million. Retail space that'll rent for $20,000 a month. A private park for residents only. "That's not illegal," someone said. Gordon McBride, a real estate investor who'd probably done similar projects himself. "That's called development." "You're right. It's not illegal, but this is." Clara pulled up the comparative documents. The original environmental survey showing 243 families. The final impact statement showing 85. The shell companies created to hide the discrepancies. The bribes disguised as consulting fees. The room went very quiet. "How certain are you about this?" Walter leaned forward, studying the documents with the intensity of someone who knew exactly what he was looking at. "Rebecca Stein verified everything. The forensic accountant I hired used to work for the FBI. She says this is prosecutable fraud." "And you want to prosecute?" Jennifer's voice was careful, neutral. "You want Bennett Holdings to go after Vale Development. I want us to stop funding criminals." Clara met each board member's eyes in turn. "We hold 42% of Meridian Capital, which holds the majority stake in Vale's debt. That gives us leverage. We can force an audit, freeze their credit lines, block the Riverside project until a proper investigation happens. We can also get sued into oblivion," Gordon said. "Vale's lawyers will argue tortious interference, abuse of process, probably half a dozen other things. This could cost us millions in legal fees alone. It'll cost us more if we don't act." Clara's voice was steel. "Because when this fraud comes out, and it will come out, we'll be complicit. Our money funded those falsified reports. Our capital made that project possible. When the DA starts looking into this, Bennett Holdings will be on the list." That changed the energy in the room immediately. Nothing motivated the wealthy quite like the threat of personal liability. "What exactly are you proposing?" Walter asked. Clara walked them through it. A full forensic audit of all Vale Development projects, starting with Riverside. A freeze on any new funding until the audit was complete. A requirement that Vale provide legitimate environmental and community impact assessments for all current projects, verified by independent third parties. "And if Vale refuses," someone asked, "then we call in the debt. Meridian Capital can demand immediate repayment under the fraud clause in their lending agreement. Vale Development doesn't have that kind of cash on hand. They'd have to liquidate assets, probably file for bankruptcy protection." "Which would destroy the company," Gordon said, "and make us look like vindictive monsters who ruined a successful business over a personal grudge. Or it would make us look like responsible investors who refuse to fund fraud." Clara's voice didn't rise, but something in it made the room lean forward. "I spent 3 months working in companies we own. I saw how our money gets used. I saw people working 2 jobs and still not making rent. I saw managers cutting corners on safety because it was cheaper. I saw the human cost of the efficiency my father built this company on." She pulled up another photo from Rita's folder. A woman Clara's own age holding a baby on her hip while stirring something on a stove in a kitchen barely bigger than a closet. "This is Maria Santos. She's a home health aide, Works 50 hours a week taking care of elderly people for $12 an hour. She lives in Riverside with her husband and 2 kids in a 1-bedroom apartment that costs $900 a month. If Vale's project goes through, she'll have to move. The affordable housing in the new development would cost her $2,400 a month. She'd have to leave Brooklyn entirely. Leave her job, pull her kids out of school, start over somewhere else. Clara clicked to the next photo. An elderly man sitting on a stoop, a cane propped beside him. This is James Wilson. 78 years old, lived in the same apartment for 53 years. Retired mechanic on a fixed income. Where does he go when Vale demolishes his building? She went through 6 more photos, 6 more stories, 6 more lives that would be upended so wealthy people could have river views and artisanal coffee shops. Our money is making this happen, Clara said quietly. Our capital, our investments, our willingness to look the other way as long as the returns stay high. And I'm done with it. The room was silent for a long moment. Then Walter spoke. I knew your father for 30 years, watched him build this company from a single office and a phone book full of contacts. He was brilliant and ruthless, and he never let sentiment interfere with profit. He paused, his eyes sharp on Clara's face. He would have hated what you just proposed. I know. Good. Walter smiled slightly. Because your father's way is what got us here. Maybe it's time to try something different. You're actually supporting this? Gordon looked between them like they'd both lost their minds. I'm supporting due diligence, Walter said. If Vale committed fraud, we have a legal obligation to act. If he didn't, an audit will prove it and we'll back off. Either way, we're protected. Jennifer nodded slowly. I agree. This isn't about revenge. It's about risk management. The vote took 10 minutes, 8 in favor, 3 opposed, 1 abstention. Not unanimous, but enough. Clara felt something release in her chest, something she hadn't realized she'd been holding tight. I'll draft a letter to Vale Development today, she said. Give them 72 hours to respond to our concerns before we take formal action. Make it 48, Walter said. If they're innocent, they won't need more time than that. If they're guilty, they'll use every hour we give them to hide evidence. The meeting broke up quickly after that. Board members filed out, some looking relieved, others troubled. Gordon left without saying goodbye. Jennifer squeezed Clara's shoulder on her way past. Walter stayed behind. That was quite a presentation, he said when they were alone. It was the truth. The truth is usually quite effective. He stood slowly, wincing at his back. But Clara, you need to understand something. What you're doing, it's going to get messy. Vale won't roll over quietly. He'll fight back hard and dirty. Are you ready for that? I don't know, Clara admitted, but I'm doing it anyway. Then let me give you some advice your father would never have given you. Walter's voice softened. Don't do this alone. You've got good instincts, but you're young and you've never been in a real corporate war. Let me help. Let Jennifer help. We've been through these battles before. Clara nodded, surprised to find her throat tight. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. This is going to get worse before it gets better. He left, and Clara was alone in the conference room with her laptop and 9 million people who'd watched her humiliate a billionaire. Her phone buzzed. Elizabeth. How'd it go? We got the votes. Draft a letter to Vale Development. 48-hour deadline for response. On it. Also, Rita Morales called. She wants to know if you're still meeting at 2. Clara checked her watch. 11:30. She had time. Tell her I'll be there. The drive back to Brooklyn was different this time. Clara wasn't scouting anymore. Wasn't trying to understand from a distance. She was committed now. All in. Whatever happened next, she'd tied her fortune to this neighborhood and these people. Rosa's cafe was busier than yesterday. The lunch rush was starting, the small space filling with the smell of rice and beans and plantains. Rosa was behind the counter, moving with practiced efficiency while calling out orders in Spanish. Rita was sitting at the same plastic table Clara had used yesterday. She was younger than Clara expected, maybe 26 or 27, with her mother's eyes and a tiredness that had nothing to do with lack of sleep. Miss Bennett. Rita stood up when Clara approached. Thanks for coming. Call me Clara, please. They sat. Rosa brought over 2 cafes con leche without being asked. Mom says you really want to help, Rita said, that you're not just looking for good publicity. I'm really not. The publicity has been mostly terrible. Rita smiled slightly. 9 million views. Must be weird having your life go viral. Extremely. Clara wrapped her hands around the warm cup.
But it's getting people to pay attention. That's something. Attention doesn't stop bulldozers. Rita's voice wasn't bitter, just factual. I've been organizing this community for 2 years. We've had attention. News crews, politicians showing up for photo ops, activists who care for about a week before moving on to the next cause. None of it matters because Vale has permits and money and the law on his side. What if he doesn't? Rita looked up sharply. What do you mean? Clara told her. About the board meeting, the audit, the evidence of fraud. About freezing Vale's funding and demanding legitimate assessments. About the 48-hour deadline that was already ticking. Rita listened without interrupting, her coffee going cold in her hands. You're serious, she said when Clara finished. You're actually going after him. Yes. Why? The question was direct, challenging. You don't know us. This isn't your neighborhood. You could walk away right now and go back to being a billionaire who tried to do something good. Why risk everything on people you don't even know? Clara thought about the easy answer, the one about corporate responsibility and fiduciary duty. Thought about the true answer, that she was tired of being useless, tired of inherited wealth she hadn't earned, tired of a world where money mattered more than people. Instead, she said, because I worked as a waitress for 3 months and a man called me nothing. And if he's right, if people like me really are nothing to people like him, then what's the point of any of this? Rita studied her for a long moment. Then she pulled out her phone and made a call. Carlos? Yeah, it's Rita. Get everyone together. Tonight, 7 o'clock, Community Center. She paused, listening. I know it's Thanksgiving. I don't care. This is important. She hung up and looked at Clara. You want to help? Come to the meeting tonight. Meet the people you're fighting for. Let them decide if they trust you. Okay. Fair warning, they're not going to make it easy. People here have been screwed over by rich white women with good intentions before. Clara almost pointed out that she was Chinese American, not white. Then she realized Rita's point had nothing to do with race and everything to do with money. I understand, she said instead. Rita stood up. 7 o'clock. Don't be late. She started to leave, then turned back. And Clara, thank you for trying. Even if it doesn't work, thank you for trying. Clara spent the afternoon preparing differently than she'd prepared for the board meeting. No slides, no data, no carefully rehearsed arguments. Just herself and the truth and the hope that it would be enough. At 6:30, she got back in her rented car and drove to the Riverside Community Center. It was an old building, probably had been a school once. The paint was peeling, the windows were covered in burglar bars, and the whole thing had the worn-down look of a place that survived on hope and duct tape. Inside was warmer. Folding chairs arranged in a circle, coffee brewing in an ancient percolator. People arriving in ones and twos with the comfortable familiarity of folks who'd been doing this for years. Rita found Clara hovering near the door. You came. I said I would. Yeah, well, rich people say a lot of things. Rita gestured to the chairs. Sit anywhere. We'll start in a few minutes. Clara sat and watched the room fill. About 30 people showed up, ranging from teenagers to elderly couples who walked in holding hands. Rosa arrived with a tray of pastries from her cafe. A man with paint-stained hands brought folding tables. A woman with a sleeping baby and a carrier distributed photocopied flyers. This was a community, a real one, not the sanitized version from Vale's architectural renderings. Rita called the meeting to order at 7:15. Thanks for coming, especially on Thanksgiving. I know everyone has family waiting, so I'll keep this short. She gestured to Clara. This is Clara Bennett. Some of you saw the video. She's the chairwoman of the company that funds Vale Development, and she says she wants to help us. Silence. 30 pairs of eyes, all turned toward Clara. Not hostile exactly, but deeply skeptical. Clara stood up, her hands shaking slightly. I'm not going to pretend I understand what you're going through, she started. I'm not going to stand here and act like I know what it's like to worry about losing your home. Because I don't. I've never had to worry about money. I've never had to choose between rent and food. I've never had to watch my neighborhood get destroyed by people who saw it as nothing but profit potential. Someone in the back muttered something. A few people nodded. But I do know what it's like to be treated like you don't matter, Clara continued. I spent 3 months working minimum wage jobs in companies my money owns. And I learned that the system I inherited, the one my father built, it's designed to extract value from people like you and transfer it to people like me. And I'm tired of it. So what are you going to do? This from an older man in the front row. Talk about how bad you feel? We've heard that before. No.
Clara pulled out her phone and opened her email, turning it so everyone could see. I'm going to show you the letter my company is sending to Vale Development in the morning. She read it aloud. Every word of the audit demand, the funding freeze, the requirement for legitimate assessments, the 48-hour deadline, the consequences if Vale refused. The room stayed quiet when she finished. Then someone started clapping. Slowly at first, then others joined in, and suddenly the whole room was applauding, and Clara felt tears pricking at her eyes. That's real? The older man asked. You're really doing that? Yes. And if he fights back, then we fight harder. A woman stood up near the back. Maria Santos from the photo in Rita's folder, the one holding a baby while cooking in a too-small kitchen. My family has lived here for 18 years, she said. Her voice was accented, careful. We came from El Salvador. This is our home. Our children's school is here. Our church is here. Everything we built is here. She looked directly at Clara. If you can save it, we will help you. Whatever you need. I need witnesses, Clara said. The idea was forming even as she spoke. Vale's impact statement says only 85 families will be displaced. We need proof that the real number is over 200. Photos, lease agreements, utility bills, anything that shows people actually live in these buildings. We can get that, Rita said immediately. Give us 2 days. I also need people willing to testify if this goes to court, to tell their stories publicly, on record. Hands shot up across the room. At least 15 people, ready to stand up and be counted. Clara felt something crack open in her chest. These people had been fighting alone for so long, and now, maybe, they had someone with the resources to actually make a difference. There's something else, she added. Vale will fight back. He'll try to discredit me, discredit all of us. He'll say this is about revenge, that I'm abusing my power, that you're all being manipulated. It's going to get ugly. Let it get ugly, Rosa called out from the side. We've been fighting ugly for 2 years. At least now we've got a chance. The meeting shifted after that, becoming more tactical. Rita had maps of the neighborhood with all the residential buildings marked. Someone else had copies of all the permits Vale had filed. A young man who worked in IT said he could set up a secure website for collecting evidence. They organized themselves with the efficiency of people who'd been doing this long enough to know what worked. Clara mostly listened, contributing when she could, but recognizing that these people were experts at fighting developers. She was just the one with the money to make it stick. The meeting broke up around 9. People left in small groups talking quietly, some looking hopeful for the first time in months. Rita walked Clara to her car. You know this is going to consume your life, right? Rita leaned against the car door. Once we start gathering evidence, once this becomes public, you won't be able to walk away. I know. And you're still going to do it? Yes. Rita nodded slowly. Then welcome to the fight, Clara Bennett. Try to keep up. Clara drove back to Manhattan with her mind racing. She had 48 hours before the letter went out. 48 hours to prepare for whatever came next. Her phone rang as she crossed the bridge. Ethan Vale's number. She almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won out. Clara Bennett. We need to talk. His voice was tight, controlled, angry. I don't think we do. You're making a mistake, a massive, career-ending mistake. That's your opinion. It's a fact. She heard him take a breath, forcing calm. Look, what happened at the restaurant? I was out of line. I apologize. But this vendetta you're pursuing, it's going to hurt a lot of people who don't deserve it. You mean it'll hurt you? It'll hurt the 300 people I employ. It'll hurt the investors who trusted me. It'll hurt the 243 families you plan to displace with falsified environmental reports, Clara cut him off. I've seen the documents, Ethan. I know what you did. Silence on the other end. Then, those reports were prepared by licensed consultants. Licensed consultants you paid to lie. That's slander. That's the truth. And in 48 hours, it'll be public record. Clara pulled into her building's garage. Was there anything else? Yes. His voice changed, became colder. I want you to understand something. I've built my company over 8 years. I've created thousands of jobs, revitalized neighborhoods, generated billions in economic growth, and you think you can destroy all of that because I hurt your feelings? I think I can stop you from committing fraud. There's a difference. There's no difference. You're using your inherited money to attack someone who actually earned what they have. You're everything wrong with generational wealth, no real skills, no real accomplishments, just a lucky last name and a grudge. The words stung because part of them was true. Clara had inherited everything. She hadn't built Bennett Holdings. She'd just been born to the right father at the right time. But she'd also spent 3 months in the real world. She'd seen what his revitalization actually meant. "You're right," she said quietly. "I didn't earn my money. It was luck. Pure accident of birth. But that doesn't make what you're doing any less wrong. And it doesn't mean I'm going to stand by and let it happen." "Then you're a fool." "Maybe. But I'm a fool with 42% of your debt, so I guess we'll see who ends up regretting this more." She hung up before he could respond. Her hands were shaking again, from anger, from fear, from the enormousness of what she'd started. Upstairs in her apartment, Clara made tea and sat at her dining room table, surrounded by documents and evidence and the weight of 243 families depending on her. Her phone buzzed, a text from Rita. "Just wanted to say thanks again. My mom hasn't looked this hopeful in months. Don't screw this up." Clara smiled despite herself and typed back, "I'll try not to." Another text, this one from Elizabeth. "Letter is drafted and ready to send. Just say the word." Clara looked at the documents one more time. The falsified reports, the shell companies, the evidence of systematic fraud. She thought about Maria Santos and her too small kitchen, about James Wilson and his 53 years in the same apartment, about Rose's cafe and paint-stained hands and sleeping babies in carriers. She thought about Ethan Vale calling her nothing. Then she typed back to Elizabeth, "Send it." The letter went out at midnight. Formal legal notice from Bennett Holdings to Vale Development Group, outlining allegations of fraud and demanding a comprehensive response within 48 hours. Clara didn't sleep that night. She sat at her window watching the city lights and wondering if she'd just made the biggest mistake of her life or the first real decision that mattered. At 7 in the morning, her phone started ringing. The first call was from Morrison and Wells, Vale's lawyers, threatening litigation. The second was from a reporter at the Times who'd somehow gotten her personal number. The third was from Walter Chen. "Have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "No? Why?" "Turn on CNBC." Clara found the remote and switched on her TV. The business channel was running a segment about Bennett Holdings' letter to Vale Development. They had legal experts debating fraud charges. They had real estate analysts predicting market impact. They had a photo of Clara from the restaurant video with the caption, "Billionaire heiress declares war." "It's everywhere," Walter said. "Every business channel, every financial website. You've made this the biggest story in real estate."
"Is that good or bad?" "Honestly, I don't know yet." He paused. "But you can't back down now. The whole world is watching." Clara watched the TV analysts debate her motives and competence and chances of success. Watched them reduce a fight for people's homes into a personality conflict between two wealthy people. She turned off the TV. "I'm not backing down," she told Walter. "Whatever happens, I'm seeing this through." "Good, because Vale's going to come at you with everything he has, starting in about 3 hours." "What do you mean?" "He called an emergency press conference for 10 o'clock. He's going to respond publicly, try to get ahead of this story. You should be ready." Clara looked at her reflection in the dark TV screen. She looked exhausted, unprepared, way too young to be fighting a battle this big. "Then I'll be ready," she said. She spent the next 2 hours getting ready. Not physically. That took 20 minutes to shower and dress, an attempt to look like someone who had their life together. The rest of the time she spent preparing mentally for whatever Ethan Vale was about to throw at her. At 9:30, Elizabeth called. "Vale's press conference is live streaming. I'm sending you the link." Clara opened it on her laptop. Ethan stood at a podium in what looked like his corporate headquarters, surrounded by employees and lawyers. He looked calm, professional, every inch the successful CEO. "Thank you all for coming," he began. "I want to address the allegations that have been made against Vale Development Group. These claims are false, they're malicious, and they're part of a personal vendetta by someone who is abusing her position and her inherited wealth to attack a legitimate business." Clara watched him speak. Watched him pivot from denial to counterattack with practiced ease. Clara Bennett spent 3 months working undercover in various businesses, including a restaurant where I happened to have dinner. During that dinner, there was an unfortunate incident where I, admittedly, lost my temper. I've since apologized for my behavior that evening, but Ms. Bennett has chosen to use that personal conflict to launch what amounts to a hostile attack on my company, my employees, and my investors. He pulled up documents on a screen behind him. Reports, permits,
signed certifications. These are the legitimate environmental and community assessments for the Riverside project, prepared by licensed professionals, reviewed by city agencies, approved through proper channels. There is no fraud. There is no conspiracy. There is only a successful development project that will bring jobs and growth to a struggling neighborhood. A reporter shouted a question. What about the allegations of falsified displacement numbers? Those numbers came from preliminary surveys done years ago, before the project scope was finalized. The current impact statement reflects the actual project as it exists today. Any discrepancies are the result of normal project evolution, not fraud. Clara felt ice in her stomach. He was good at this, really good. Taking her evidence and reframing it as misunderstanding, presenting himself as the victim of a wealthy woman's grudge. I want to be clear, Ethan continued. I welcome any legitimate audit of my business practices. I have nothing to hide, but I will not allow Bennett Holdings to abuse their position as lenders to interfere with legal projects that will benefit thousands of people. If they continue down this path, we will pursue every legal remedy available to us. He took a few more questions, answered them all smoothly, and ended the conference looking like a reasonable man defending himself against unreasonable accusations. Clara closed her laptop and sat in silence. Her phone rang immediately. Rita, please tell me you saw that. I saw it. He's lying. Everything he said about the numbers, about the surveys, it's all lies. Rita's voice was tight with fury. We have to respond. We have to tell people the truth. We will, Clara said, but not yet. Let him think he's won. Let him feel safe. Then we hit him with everything. How long? Clara thought about the evidence they were still gathering, the witnesses they needed to prepare, the legal strategy that was still coming together. 3 days, she said. Give me 3 days to build an airtight case. Then we go public with everything. She hung up and immediately called Rebecca Stein. I need you to accelerate the audit. Everything you can find as fast as you can find it. I don't care what it costs. Already on it, Rebecca said. But Clara, you should know, Vail's fighting back hard. He's blocking access to records, claiming attorney-client privilege on documents we need, generally throwing up every obstacle possible. Can you get around it? Eventually, but it'll take time. We don't have time. Clara stood up, pacing her apartment. He just went on TV and called me a vindictive rich girl with a grudge. Every hour we delay, that narrative gets stronger. Then maybe you need to change the narrative. Clara stopped pacing. What do you mean? You're letting him control the story. He's positioning this as Bennett Holdings versus Vail Development, two corporations fighting over money. What if you reframe it? Make it about the people, not the companies. Clara thought about the community meeting, about Maria and James and Rosa and Rita, about 30 people raising their hands, ready to testify. I need to make some calls, she said. She spent the rest of the day reaching out to journalists she trusted, not the business reporters covering this as a corporate story, but the local reporters who covered communities and neighborhoods and the human cost of development. By evening, she had 3 of them lined up to visit Riverside, to meet the families, see the neighborhood, hear the stories that Vail's press conference had completely erased. At 7 o'clock, Clara got in her car and drove back to Brooklyn one more time. Rita was waiting outside Rosa's cafe. We've got the evidence you asked for, she said. Lease agreements, utility bills, photos. Proof that 243 families live in those buildings, not 85. Good, because we're going to need it. They went inside where Rosa had coffee waiting and a table covered in documents. For the next 3 hours, Clara and Rita organized everything into a timeline, before and after. What Vail claimed versus what actually existed. The truth, laid out in black and white, and the faces of people who'd been living their lives until a billionaire decided their neighborhood was worth more empty than full. Around 10 o'clock, Maria Santos stopped by with her 2 kids. I heard you needed witnesses, she said. People willing to tell their stories. I want to do it. It'll be public, Clara warned. Your name, your face, everything about your life. Vail's lawyers will try to discredit you. Let them try. Maria's jaw was set. My children deserve to grow up in their home. If I have to fight for that, I will. By midnight, they had 15 families ready to testify. 15 stories of lives built over years and decades, now threatened by a man who saw them as obstacles to profit. Clara drove home as the city slept, knowing that in 48 hours, the real war would begin. And this time, she wouldn't be fighting alone. The 48 hours expired at midnight on Sunday. Clara was awake when it happened, sitting in her office at Bennett Holdings headquarters with Rebecca Stein and a team of lawyers who looked like they'd been living on coffee and spite for 3 days straight. "Still no response from Vale," Rebecca said, checking her phone for the dozenth time. Radio silence.
"He's stalling." James Chen paced near the window, his usual calm frayed around the edges. "Hoping we'll back down or lose momentum." "We're not backing down." Clara looked at the evidence spread across the conference table. 3 days of work condensed into a prosecution-ready case. "Send the full audit demand to Meridian Capital. If Vale won't respond to us, maybe he'll respond to his creditors." Elizabeth appeared in the doorway looking exhausted. "The journalists are ready. They've toured Riverside, interviewed families, documented everything. The Times is running their story tomorrow morning. Brooklyn Voice and The Post are publishing online tonight." "What about the families? Are they prepared for what's coming?" "Rita's been coaching them. They know Vale's people will try to tear them apart." Elizabeth's expression was grim. "Maria Santos told me she's been getting threatening phone calls. Someone called her house at 2 in the morning, told her to keep her mouth shut." Clara's hands curled into fists. "Did she report it? Oh, to who? The police?" Elizabeth's laugh was bitter. "Clara, these people don't trust the police. Half of them are undocumented or have family members who are. They're terrified, but they're doing it anyway." The weight of that settled over the room. 15 families putting everything on the line because Clara had promised she could protect them. She couldn't fail them. "What time is the board meeting?" she asked. 9 a.m., Vale Developments Board, not ours. Rebecca pulled up a document on her laptop. Meridian Capital called an emergency session. They're voting on whether to freeze Vale's credit lines pending the audit. Will they do it? If they want to avoid criminal liability for funding fraud? Yes. Rebecca's smile was sharp. "I sent them our evidence, all of it. They're scared, Clara. Really scared." Clara's phone buzzed. A text from Rita. "News vans showed up in Riverside an hour ago. Everyone's nervous but ready. Don't let us down." She typed back, "I won't." At 3 in the morning, the first article went live. Brooklyn Voice led with a photo of Maria Santos standing in front of her building, her children on either side of her. "Riverside families fight back. The real cost of luxury development." Clara read it twice, her throat tight. The journalist had done exactly what she'd hoped. Made it personal, made it real, made it impossible to dismiss as just another corporate fight. By 6 a.m., the Times article was up. More measured, more analytical, but equally damning. They'd found discrepancies in 3 other Vale projects, patterns of falsified reports, and disappeared communities. Clara's phone started ringing before 7. Reporters, investors, people she barely knew wanting statements or explanations, or just to be associated with what was rapidly becoming the biggest real estate scandal in years. She ignored all of them and focused on getting ready. The clothes felt like armor again. Tailored suit, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back severe and professional. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 4 days ago, she'd been a waitress in a stained uniform. Now she was about to walk into a corporate headquarters and potentially destroy a $3 billion company. Elizabeth met her in the lobby at 8:30. Meridian Capital's building, 42nd floor. The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Is Vale going to be there? According to his lawyer, yes. He's planning to defend himself personally. Elizabeth handed Clara a tablet. "These are the talking points Rebecca prepared. Stick to them. Don't get emotional. Don't get personal. Just present the facts." Clara took the tablet but didn't look at it. She'd spent 3 days living in these facts. She didn't need talking points. The car ride to Midtown was silent. Clara watched the city scroll past. Early morning workers heading to their jobs, street vendors setting up, the whole complex machinery of 8 million lives intersecting and diverging and somehow keeping the whole thing running. Somewhere in that chaos were the families from Riverside, getting their kids ready for school, making coffee, living their lives while waiting to find out if those lives would be allowed to continue. The Meridian Capital building was glass and steel arrogance, the kind of structure designed to make visitors feel small. Clara had been in 100 buildings like it. She walked through the lobby with her head high and her expression calm, even though her heart was trying to break out of her chest. Rebecca was waiting by the elevators. Vale's already upstairs, brought his entire legal team and half his executive staff. She handed Clara a folder. Updated evidence. We found 2 more shell companies this morning, both tied to fake consulting firms. How many does that make? 7.
all created within 6 months of each project, all dissolved within a year. It's a pattern, Clara. Clear, documented, prosecutable. They rode the elevator in silence. Clara could feel the tension radiating off Rebecca, the coiled energy of a lawyer about to go to war. The 42nd floor was all corporate minimalism and expensive art. A receptionist directed them to the main conference room, where Meridian Capital's board was already assembled. 12 people sat around a massive table. Clara recognized most of them, the kind of investors who moved billions with a signature and slept fine at night regardless of the consequences. And at the far end of the table, flanked by lawyers, sat Ethan Vale. He looked different than he had at the restaurant. Older, somehow, the silver in his hair more pronounced. His suit was immaculate, his expression controlled, but Clara could see the strain around his eyes. Good. Let him be worried. Ms. Bennett. The speaker was Harrison Wolfe, Meridian's CEO. 60 years old, ruthless, and currently very interested in not going to prison. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for calling this meeting. Yes, well, your evidence was quite compelling. He gestured to a chair. Please, sit. Mr. Vale was just explaining his position. Clara sat across from Ethan. Their eyes met for the first time since the restaurant, and she saw the fury there, carefully banked but burning bright. As I was saying, Ethan continued, his voice steady, these allegations are based on misunderstandings and misrepresentations. Miss Bennett has taken preliminary documents out of context and constructed a narrative that doesn't reflect reality. The reality, Clara said quietly, is that your impact statements claim 85 families will be displaced when the actual number is 243. That's not a misunderstanding. That's fraud. It's Project Evolution. The scope changed over time. Oh, the scope didn't change. The lies did. Clara opened her folder and pulled out the comparative documents. This is your preliminary survey from Northfield Environmental, 243 residential units, and this is your final assessment from Apex Environmental, 85 units. Apex didn't exist until 6 months after the preliminary survey. It shares an office address with 3 other firms that exclusively work for you. It was created specifically to produce fake numbers. She slid the documents across the table. The board members leaned forward, studying them with the intensity of people realizing they might be accessories to a crime. And before you claim Apex is a legitimate firm, Clara continued, we've documented the money trail. You paid Northfield $50,000 for the real survey. Then you paid them $200,000 in consulting fees to go away. 1 month later, they dissolved their company. Ethan's jaw tightened. That payment was for additional services. What services? They never worked for you again. They took your money and disappeared. Clara pulled out more documents. And this is just Riverside. We found the same pattern in 3 other projects. Shell companies, falsified reports, communities erased on paper so they could be erased in reality. The room was very quiet. Harrison Wolfe cleared his throat. Mr. Vale, these are serious allegations. Do you have documentation to refute them? I have the approved permits, the certified reports, the legal authorizations. Based on fraudulent data, Rebecca cut in. She'd been silent until now, but her voice carried the weight of someone who'd prosecuted white-collar criminals for a living. Mr. Vale, I've reviewed every document related to your projects. The fraud isn't subtle. It's systematic, deliberate, and absolutely prosecutable. One of the board members spoke up. If this goes to the DA, Meridian Capital could face criminal liability for funding these projects. Which is why, Harrison said heavily, we need to determine our exposure and take appropriate action. Ethan stood up abruptly. You're not seriously considering this. Bennett Holdings is using their position as lenders to interfere with legitimate business because Clara Bennett has a personal grudge. This isn't personal, Clara said. Isn't it? He turned on her, and for a moment the controlled CEO mask slipped. You humiliated me in public, made me a laughingstock, and now you're using your inheritance to destroy what I built with my own hands. You destroyed what you built the moment you decided fraud was an acceptable business practice. I provided jobs, created value, improved neighborhoods. You displaced families, you lied to regulatory agencies, you broke the law. Clara stood to face him. And you did it because you thought no one would notice, because people like Maria Santos and James Wilson don't matter to people like you. Don't lecture me about what matters. Ethan's voice rose. You've never built anything. You've never risked anything. You inherited billions from your father, and now you're playing activist because it makes you feel important. You're right. I inherited everything. I didn't earn it. I didn't deserve it. I just got lucky. Clara's voice stayed level. But that doesn't make what you did any less wrong, and it doesn't mean I'm going to let you keep doing it. Enough. Harrison stood up, his voice cutting through the tension. This isn't productive. Mr. Vale, you have a choice. Submit to a full independent audit of all your projects, or Meridian Capital will immediately freeze your credit lines and call in your debt. Ethan's face went pale. You can't do that. We have contracts, with fraud clauses, which your alleged activities appear to have triggered. Harrison's expression was stone. We're protecting our interests, Mr. Vale. Nothing personal. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Ethan looked around the table, seeing his support crumbling in real time. These people didn't care about him or his projects or his carefully built empire. They cared about protecting themselves. How long do I have? To decide? Right now. Harrison gestured to the documents. Accept the audit, or we move forward with credit termination. Clara watched Ethan calculating, saw him running through options, looking for the angle that would save him, but there wasn't one. She'd made sure of that. Fine, he said finally. I'll submit to the audit, but I want it on record that this is coercion, and Bennett Holdings is abusing their position. Noted. Harrison cut him off. You'll receive the formal audit requirements by end of business today. Full cooperation is mandatory. Any obstruction will result in immediate credit termination. The meeting broke up quickly after that. Board members filed out, already on their phones with lawyers and publicists. Ethan left with his legal team, his back rigid with fury. Clara stayed in her seat, suddenly exhausted. Rebecca sat down beside her. You did it. You actually backed him into a corner. It's not over yet. The audit could take months. He'll fight every step. Let him fight. We have enough evidence to bury him regardless of what the audit finds. Rebecca's smile was fierce. Clara, you won. Against a billionaire with unlimited resources and 8 years of momentum. You won. Clara's phone buzzed. A text from Rita. I'm watching the news. They're saying Vale's projects are under investigation. Is it true? Did you really do it? She typed back, It's true. The audit is happening. Rita's response came immediately. Everyone here is crying. My mom is crying. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Clara felt her own eyes burning. She'd done it. Actually done it. Not just for herself, not just to prove she could, but for 243 families who deserve to keep their homes. Elizabeth appeared in the doorway. The media wants statements. Vale's team is already spinning this as corporate overreach. Let them spin. Clara stood up, steadier now. Schedule a press conference for this afternoon. I'll make a statement then. The press conference was held in Bennett Holdings' main lobby, cameras and reporters packed in so tight Clara could barely see the back of the room. She stood at a podium with the company logo behind her, Rebecca on one side and Walter Chen on the other. The questions started before she could make her opening statement. Is this retaliation for what happened at the restaurant? Are you planning a hostile takeover of Vale Development? How do you respond to accusations that you're abusing your position as a lender? Clara waited for silence. When it finally came, she spoke clearly and carefully. 4 days ago, I was working as a waitress at a Manhattan restaurant when a customer treated me with contempt and cruelty. That customer was Ethan Vale. What he didn't know was that I'd been working undercover in companies my family's holdings fund, trying to understand the real impact of our investments. She paused, letting that sink in. What I learned horrified me. I saw people working multiple jobs and still not making rent. I saw corners cut on safety. I saw communities destroyed for profit. And when I looked into Vale Development's projects, I found systematic fraud designed to circumvent environmental and community protection laws. The cameras flashed like lightning. This isn't about revenge. This is about accountability. It's about 243 families in Brooklyn who are going to lose their homes based on falsified reports. It's about every community that Vale Development has displaced while claiming minimal impact. What about Vale's claim that you're misrepresenting the data? A reporter shouted. The data speaks for itself. Preliminary surveys show one number, final assessments show completely different numbers, and the firms that prepared those assessments were created specifically for Vale's projects. That's not misrepresentation. That's fraud. Will you be seeking criminal charges? That's up to the district attorney. We've provided all our evidence to the appropriate authorities. Our concern is ensuring no more communities are destroyed based on lies. She took a few more questions, then stepped away from the podium. The reporters kept shouting, but she was done talking. Upstairs in her office, Clara collapsed into her chair and let herself feel the full weight of what she'd just done. She'd declared war on a billionaire, exposed fraud that could send people to prison, and made herself the most talked-about person in New York. And somewhere in Brooklyn, families were crying with relief. Her phone rang. Unknown number, but she answered anyway. "This is Clara Bennett." "Ms. Bennett." The voice was female, professional, careful. "My name is Sarah Chen. I'm an assistant district attorney. I've been reviewing the evidence you provided regarding Vail Development Group." Clara sat up straighter. And I'd like to schedule a meeting, tomorrow, if possible. We're very interested in what you've uncovered." "I'll be there." She hung up and allowed herself a small smile. The DA was interested. That meant this was moving beyond corporate disputes into actual criminal investigation territory. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from a number she recognized, Ethan Vail's personal cell. She almost didn't answer. Then curiosity won out. "What do you want?" "To talk." His voice was different now, quieter, less controlled. "Off the record, just you and me." "I don't think that's a good idea." "Please." The word sounded like it cost him. "One conversation, 30 minutes. Name the place." Clara thought about saying no, thought about hanging up and letting the lawyers handle everything from here on out. But part of her wanted to hear what he had to say, wanted to look him in the eye one more time now that the power dynamic had completely reversed. "Tomorrow, 2 p.m., my office. I'll be there." She hung up and sat in the darkening office, watching the city lights come on below. Tomorrow she'd meet with the DA and potentially send a billionaire to prison. Tomorrow she'd face Ethan Vail and hear whatever he thought could change her mind. But tonight she allowed herself to feel what she'd been holding back for 4 days. Pride, exhaustion, fear, relief. All of it mixing together into something she couldn't quite name. Her phone buzzed one more time, a text from her father's old number. Elizabeth must have sent it from his archived phone. It was a photo from 2 years ago. Clara and her father at the office, celebrating some deal she couldn't even remember now. He was smiling, proud, his arm around her shoulders. She stared at that photo for a long time. Walter had been right. Her father would have hated what she was doing. He'd built Bennett Holdings on efficiency and profit margins, on maximizing returns regardless of human cost. He would have seen her investigation as sentimental weakness. But he was gone, and the company was hers now. And she was going to run it differently, even if it meant tearing apart everything he'd built. Clara texted Elizabeth back. "Delete that photo. I don't need it anymore." Then she turned off her phone, locked her office, and went home to prepare for whatever came next. The meeting with the DA happened in a nondescript government building in Lower Manhattan, all fluorescent lights and worn furniture and the particular smell of overworked bureaucracy. Sarah Chen was younger than Clara expected, maybe 35, with sharp eyes and the manner of someone who'd prosecuted enough criminals to stop being impressed by money. "Thank you for coming," she said, gesturing Clara to a chair across from a desk buried in files. "I've reviewed your evidence. It's comprehensive." "Is it enough?" "For an investigation, absolutely. For an indictment?" Sarah pulled out a legal pad covered in notes. "That depends on what we find when we dig deeper. Fraud is notoriously difficult to prosecute in real estate because there's so much room for interpretation. Vail will claim everything was a mistake, a miscommunication, a clerical error. 7 shell companies isn't a clerical error. No, it's not, which is why we're taking this seriously." Sarah leaned forward. "But I need you to understand something. If we pursue this, it's going to get messy. Vail has resources. He'll hire the best defense attorneys. He'll attack our witnesses. He'll make this a media circus. The families from Riverside are ready to testify. Are they ready to have their entire lives examined? Their financial records, their immigration status, their criminal histories if they have any? Because that's what Vail's lawyers will do. They'll find every vulnerability and exploit it." Clara thought about Maria Santos getting threatening phone calls at 2 in the morning, about Rita organizing people who'd already been fighting for 2 years, about Rosa crying because someone finally believed them. "They're ready," she said, "and I'll protect them however I can." Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we'll move forward. But Clara, can I call you Clara?" "Please." "Clara, this is going to change your life. You're already public, but this will make it permanent. Every decision you've ever made, every mistake, every relationship, all of it will be examined. Are you ready for that?" Clara thought about the restaurant video with 9 million views. about working as a waitress while running a billion-dollar company, about the look on Ethan Vale's face when she'd revealed who she really was. I'm ready. The meeting with Ethan happened 3 hours later in her office at Bennett Holdings. She'd considered meeting somewhere neutral but decided she wanted the home field advantage. He arrived exactly at 2, alone despite her expectation of lawyers and handlers. He looked tired, Clara realized, the strain of the past 4 days showing in lines around his eyes and mouth. "Thank you for seeing me," he said. Clara gestured to a chair. "You have 30 minutes. He sat, and for a moment they just looked at each other. Billionaire to billionaire. The man who'd called her nothing, and the woman who'd proven him catastrophically wrong. "I owe you an apology," Ethan said finally. "A real one, not the corporate version my lawyers drafted. What I said at the restaurant, it was cruel and unfair, and I'm sorry." "Okay. Just okay? What do you want me to say? That I forgive you? That it's all fine?" Clara leaned back in her chair. "You humiliated me in front of a room full of people because you could. Because I was powerless and you weren't. An apology doesn't change that." "I know." He ran a hand through his hair, disheveling the perfect styling. "I was having a terrible day. My daughter had been sick, I'd been up all night, I had this huge deal riding on the dinner meeting, and everything felt like it was falling apart. And then you spilled the wine, and I took it out on you, which was wrong, completely wrong." "You have a daughter?" "Emma. She's 6. His expression softened. "My wife died 3 years ago. Cancer. Since then, it's been just the two of us." Clara felt something shift in her chest. Not sympathy exactly, but a recognition of complexity. Ethan Vale wasn't just a villain in a simple story. He was a person. Flawed, grieving, making terrible choices for complicated reasons. But that didn't excuse what he'd done. "I'm sorry about your wife," she said. "But that doesn't change the fraud." "I know." He met her eyes. "Clara, I'm not here to ask you to drop the investigation. I know you won't, and honestly, maybe you shouldn't. But I want you to understand something. Those projects, the development work, I genuinely believed I was improving neighborhoods, bringing investment, creating jobs, making things better. By displacing hundreds of families, by creating new opportunities, by turning struggling neighborhoods into thriving ones." He leaned forward. "You've never built anything, Clara. You don't know what it's like to see potential where everyone else sees decay, to have a vision and fight to make it real despite everyone trying to stop you." "You're right, I've never built anything." Clara's voice stayed level. "But I've spent 3 months seeing what your building actually does to people. The home health aide who'll lose her apartment, the elderly man who's lived in the same place for 50 years, the small businesses that survived every other crisis but won't survive you. There's always collateral damage in progress. They're not collateral damage, they're people." Clara stood up, suddenly angry. "And you knew you were lying about them. You didn't accidentally miscount families. You deliberately created fake assessments to hide the truth." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You want to know the real truth?" he said finally. "The numbers were political. The city would never have approved the project if they knew the real displacement numbers. So I found a way around it. Were the reports technically fraudulent? Yes. But the project itself is solid. It's good for the neighborhood, good for the city, good for everyone in the long run. Except the people you're kicking out. Except them," he admitted. "But Clara, this is how the world works. Every major development displaces someone. Every improvement has costs. You can't build anything new without destroying something old." "Maybe that's true." Clara walked to her window, looking down at the city. "But you still have to follow the law. You still have to be honest about the costs. You don't get to lie just because you think the end justifies the means." "And you get to decide that? You who's never struggled for anything, who's never had to make the hard choices?" Clara turned to face him. "I get to decide what happens with my company's money, and I've decided we're not funding fraud anymore. The audit will proceed. If it finds criminal activity, I'll cooperate fully with the prosecution, and every project Bennett Holdings funds from now on will be held to a new standard." Ethan stood up. "Then I guess we're done here." "I guess we are." He walked to the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, I meant what I said at the restaurant. You were nothing to me that night, just another anonymous worker in a city full of them." "I know. But you were wrong about one thing." He looked back at her. "I don't work for you, not really, Because at the end of all this, I'll still have my skills, my vision, my ability to build. You'll just have your father's money and the satisfaction of tearing someone else down." The door closed behind him. Clara stood alone in her office, Ethan's words echoing in the silence. He was right, in a way. She hadn't built Bennett Holdings. She'd just inherited it and was now using that inherited power to destroy what someone else had built. But she'd also seen what that building had cost. The lives disrupted, the communities destroyed, the casual cruelty enabled by the belief that some people mattered more than others. Her phone buzzed, a text from Rita. "News is saying the DA opened an official investigation. Everyone in Riverside is celebrating. Thank you for giving us hope." Clara looked at that message for a long time. Then she texted back, "Thank you for reminding me why this matters." She turned back to her window, watching the city in all its complicated, messy, beautiful chaos. 8 million stories, 8 million struggles, 8 million people trying to build lives in a system that seemed designed to crush most of them. She couldn't fix it all, couldn't undo the damage her father's money had caused over decades, couldn't save every family, or stop every developer, or correct every injustice. But she could do this one thing, fight this one fight, stand with these specific people against this specific wrong. And maybe that was enough. Her phone rang. "Elizabeth, the audit team is ready to start Monday. Vale's lawyers are already filing objections, but Meridian Capital is holding firm. This is really happening." "Good. Also, someone leaked the full evidence file to the press. Every document, every shell company, all of it. It's everywhere." Clara smiled slightly. "Did they?"
"Clara, did you—" "I have no idea what you're talking about." She hung up and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The evidence was public now. Even if the legal process took years, even if Vale somehow avoided criminal charges, everyone would know the truth. That was worth something. Her father's photo stared at her from a frame on her desk, one she'd kept despite deleting the one from her phone. He looked proud in it, successful, like a man who'd conquered the world through sheer force of will. Clara picked up the frame and put it in a drawer. Tomorrow she'd start rebuilding Bennett Holdings into something different, something better. Something that measured success not just in profit margins, but in lives improved rather than destroyed. Tonight, she was just going to sit here and feel the weight of what she'd done. She'd called a billionaire on his lies, exposed fraud that threatened hundreds of families, started a war that might end with criminal prosecutions and ruined empires. And she'd do it all again tomorrow if she had to. Because Ethan Vale had been wrong about one thing, she wasn't nothing, not anymore. The audit took 6 weeks. 6 weeks of forensic accountants crawling through every transaction Vale Development had made in 8 years. 6 weeks of lawyers deposing employees who'd watched fraud happen and said nothing. 6 weeks of media coverage that turned Ethan Vale from real estate genius into cautionary tale about unchecked ambition. Clara watched it unfold from her office, managing Bennett Holdings while simultaneously becoming the face of corporate accountability. Magazine profiles, speaking invitations, requests to serve on ethics boards and reform committees. She turned down most of it. This wasn't about building her own brand, it was about fixing what her father's money had broken. The DA's office called on a Wednesday morning in early January. Sarah Chen's voice was professionally neutral, which somehow made the words hit harder. "We're filing charges. Securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud regulatory agencies. 8 counts total." Clara sat down slowly. Against Vale personally. Against him and 3 of his executives. The evidence is overwhelming. Shell companies, falsified documents, witness testimony from employees who were pressured to lie. We're also pursuing civil charges for restitution to displaced families. What's the timeline? Arraignment next week. Trial probably won't start for 6 months, but we're confident about our case. Sarah paused. "You should know, Vale's lawyer called this morning. They want to negotiate a plea." Clara's hand tightened on the phone. "What are they offering?" "Guilty plea on the fraud charges in exchange for a recommendation of reduced sentencing. He'd lose his license to operate in New York, pay substantial fines, probably serve 18 to 24 months. That's nothing. He destroyed lives and he gets 2 years? It's how the system works." Sarah's voice was understanding but firm. White-collar crime rarely gets the punishment it deserves. "But Clara, this is still a win. He'll be a convicted felon. His company will be dissolved, and every family affected will be compensated." Clara closed her eyes. It wasn't justice, not really, but maybe it was enough. "What do you need from me?" "Your approval. The families from Riverside are being consulted, but you're the primary complainant. If you want to push for trial instead of accepting the plea, no. Clara made the decision quickly. If the families are okay with it, I'm okay with it. Let's end this. She hung up and sat in silence, feeling the weight of it settle. Ethan Vale would go to prison. Not for long, but long enough. And his empire would crumble. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she just felt tired. Her phone buzzed. Rita. Did you hear? They're filing charges. I just got off the phone with the DA. Everyone here is losing their minds. People are crying, Clara. We won. We actually won. Clara smiled despite her exhaustion. You won. I just had money. You had more than that. You had the guts to use it. Rita's voice softened. Mom wants to know if you'll come to dinner tonight. Nothing fancy, just family. She wants to thank you properly. Clara thought about her empty penthouse, her evening of reviewing financial reports and eating takeout alone. I'd like that. Rosa's apartment was on the third floor of a walk-up in Riverside, cramped and warm and filled with the smell of cooking sofrito. The walls were covered with photos spanning decades. Weddings, graduations, babies, all the accumulated evidence of a life lived in one place. Rita answered the door with a tired smile. Fair warning, there's like 20 people here. Mom invited half the building. The apartment was packed. Maria Santos was there with her kids. James Wilson sat in the corner telling stories to anyone who'd listen. People Clara recognized from the community meetings crowded around a table loaded with food. Rosa pulled her into a hug the moment she walked in. You came. Of course I came. Good, because I made enough food for an army and you're going to eat. Rosa guided her to the table, loading a plate with rice and beans and pernil that smelled like heaven. Clara ate surrounded by conversation in Spanish and English and laughter that came from relief rather than joy. These people had been fighting for so long. Now they could finally stop. After dinner, Rita pulled her aside onto the fire escape. The November air had turned cold, and below them the neighborhood spread out in all its complicated beauty. Lights in windows, music from somewhere, the distant rumble of the subway. I wanted to show you something. Rita handed her a folder. The new development plan. The real one. Clara opened it and found architectural drawings completely different from Vale's luxury condos. Mixed-income housing, affordable rents, space preserved for existing businesses, community input sessions, environmental protections. This is what we want to build, Rita said. Not instead of development, but development that doesn't destroy what's already here. We've been working with a nonprofit developer. They're interested in partnering with us. How much will it cost? A lot less than Vale's project, but we still need funding. Banks won't touch us without collateral. Rita looked at Clara. I know you've already done so much, but Bennett Holdings will fund it. The decision came easily. Not as an investment, as a grant. Build what the community actually needs. Rita's eyes filled with tears. Seriously? Seriously, send me the proposal and I'll get it approved. They stood on the fire escape in silence for a moment, watching the neighborhood that would now have a chance to survive. Can I ask you something? Rita said finally. Why did you really do all this? And don't give me the corporate responsibility answer, the real reason. Clara thought about her father, about inherited billions she hadn't earned, about 3 months of being invisible and dismissed and treated like she didn't matter. Because I needed to know if I was worth anything, she said quietly. If I could be more than just my father's daughter spending his money. If I could actually do something that mattered. And did you figure it out? I'm starting to. The plea deal was finalized in February. Ethan Vale stood in a courtroom and admitted to 8 counts of fraud, while his daughter sat in the gallery with her nanny, too young to understand that her father was going to prison. Clara watched from the back row. She thought about not coming, letting the lawyers handle it, but she needed to see this through to the end. Vale's sentencing hearing was 3 weeks later. Clara sat through testimony from families he'd displaced, employees he'd pressured, regulators he'd deceived. Watched him stand while the judge sentenced him to 22 months in federal prison, 3 years probation, and $4.3 million in fines and restitution. He looked smaller somehow. Diminished. Not the confident billionaire who'd called her nothing, but just a man who'd made terrible choices and would now pay for them. The judge asked if he had anything to say. Ethan turned and looked directly at Clara. I was wrong, he said simply. About everything. About cutting corners, about people not mattering, about thinking success justified any cost. He paused. Especially about you, Ms. Bennett. You were never nothing. I was just too arrogant to see it. Then he was led away, and Clara sat in the empty courtroom feeling something she couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction, not triumph, just a quiet sense that maybe justice, however imperfect, had been served. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. Clara made a brief statement about accountability and reform and the importance of protecting communities, then escaped to her car before they could ask more questions. Her phone rang before she made it back to the office. Walter Chen. I saw the news. How are you holding up? Fine. Tired. Ready for this to be over. It's not over yet. We still have to rebuild. Papers rustled in the background. I've been reviewing our portfolio. There are at least a dozen other projects like Vales, companies cutting corners, communities at risk. If we're serious about changing how Bennett Holdings operates, we are, Clara said firmly. I want a full review of every investment. If we find fraud or abuse, we divest immediately. And from now on, we only fund projects that have genuine community support. That's going to cost us a lot. I know. Your father would have fired me for even suggesting it. My father isn't here. Clara pulled into the parking garage. And I'm not him. Walter was quiet for a moment. No, you're not. You're better. The words hit harder than Clara expected. She sat in her parked car, phone pressed to her ear, and felt something release in her chest. Thank you, she managed. Don't thank me yet. We have a lot of work to do. The work consumed the next 6 months. Clara restructured Bennett Holdings from the ground up, implementing oversight systems that would have made her father furious. Community impact requirements, independent audits, whistleblower protections, a new mission statement that actually meant something beyond maximizing profit. Some investors left. Gordon McBride resigned from the board with a scathing letter about abandoning fiduciary responsibility. 3 major partners pulled their money, but others stayed. Jennifer Park became Clara's strongest ally, helping design new investment criteria. Walter Chen turned into an unlikely mentor, teaching her how to balance principles with practical business reality. New investors joined, attracted by the promise of sustainable, ethical development. The company was smaller than it had been, less profitable in the short term, but it was becoming something Clara could actually be proud of. In June, she went back to Riverside for the groundbreaking ceremony of the new development project. The one built with community input, funded by Bennett Holdings grants, designed to improve the neighborhood without destroying it. Rita was there in a hard hat, grinning like she'd won the lottery. First building starts construction next month, she said, gesturing to the lot that had been empty for years. Mixed income, 60% affordable housing, preference for current residents. We did it, Clara. We actually did it. Maria Santos was there with her kids, who ran around the construction site while the adults watched nervously. Rosa had brought coffee and pastries, setting up an impromptu celebration on folding tables. James Wilson walked over to Clara, leaning heavily on his cane. I wanted to thank you, he said, for fighting when you didn't have to, for seeing us when most people just look through us. I'm just glad I could help. You did more than help. You showed people that someone with money and power can actually give a damn. He smiled. That's rarer than you think. The ceremony was simple. A few speeches, some photos, Rita turning the first shovel of dirt while everyone cheered. Nothing like the glossy presentations Vale had probably used to sell his luxury condos. But it was real. And it was right. And it was going to actually help people instead of displacing them. Clara stayed for hours, talking with families and watching kids play, and feeling like she'd finally found the answer to the question that had driven her into that first waitressing job 8 months ago. What could her money actually do? It could do this. Not fix everything, not solve systemic problems or end inequality or create some perfect world, but it could help these specific people in this specific neighborhood at this specific moment. And maybe that was enough. She drove back to Manhattan as the sun set, the city skyline emerging from the dusk like a promise or a threat, depending on your perspective. Clara had seen it from both angles now, the top floor penthouses and the basement restaurant kitchens. The boardrooms where billions moved on handshakes and the apartments where families struggled to make rent. She understood now that the city contained both. That wealth and poverty existed side by side, sometimes in the same building. That the choices made by people like her had real consequences for people like Maria and Rosa and Rita. And she understood something else too.
something that had taken 8 months of waitressing and investigating and fighting to fully grasp. Power wasn't about money, it was about how you used it. Ethan Vale had power and used it to crush anyone who got in his way. Her father had power and used it to maximize profit regardless of human cost. They both thought strength meant never showing weakness, never admitting wrong, never caring about the people they stepped on climbing higher. But Clara had learned a different lesson. The lesson that came from being called nothing and deciding to prove otherwise. Real strength wasn't about dominance. It was about standing up for people who couldn't stand up for themselves. It was about using privilege to dismantle the systems that created privilege in the first place. It was about recognizing that your worth wasn't measured by your wealth, but by what you did with it. The restaurant video had 17 million views now. It popped up in Clara's social media feeds constantly, turned into memes and reaction GIFs and inspirational posts about standing up to bullies. She still couldn't watch it without cringing. The moment of confrontation, the public humiliation, her own voice saying those words that had changed everything. Then why do you work for me? 7 words that had destroyed a billionaire's empire and rebuilt her own identity in the process. In September, Clara got a letter from Ethan Vale. He was in minimum security prison in Pennsylvania, serving his sentence and apparently taking advantage of the male privileges. The letter was handwritten, surprisingly thoughtful. "Dear Ms. Bennett," it began, "I've had a lot of time to think since our last conversation. You were right about everything. I convinced myself that progress justified any cost, that people who couldn't afford to live in my developments didn't deserve to stay, that winning was the only thing that mattered. I destroyed communities and called it improvement. I lied to regulators and called it strategy. I treated you like garbage and called it a bad day. The truth is, I'd forgotten how to see people as people instead of obstacles or assets. Somewhere between building my first project and my 50th, I lost track of why I wanted to build in the first place. It wasn't supposed to be about money or power or ego. It was supposed to be about creating something meaningful. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that what you did, exposing the fraud, fighting for those families, refusing to back down, it changed more than just my legal status. It reminded me that actions have consequences, that people matter, that being powerful doesn't make you right. My daughter asks about you sometimes. She saw the video, of course. Everyone has. She thinks you're a superhero. I tried to explain that you're just a person who did the right thing, but she insists superheroes are people too. Maybe she's smarter than both of us. Thank you for being brave enough to fight back. And I'm sorry it took losing everything for me to understand why you had to. Ethan Vale." Clara read the letter 3 times, then filed it away in a folder with all the other documents from the case. She didn't respond, didn't know what she'd say even if she wanted to. Some wounds couldn't be healed with apologies. Some damage couldn't be undone. The families Vale had displaced in other projects were still displaced. The communities he'd destroyed were still gone. 22 months in prison didn't bring any of that back. But maybe it was something that he understood now. Maybe that knowledge would prevent the next developer from making the same choices. Or maybe it wouldn't. Maybe the system was too broken, the incentives too misaligned, the gap between rich and poor too vast to bridge with individual acts of conscience. Clara didn't have those answers. She just had her money, her power, and her commitment to use both differently than they'd been used before. In October, Bennett Holdings announced a new initiative, a $100 million fund for community-led development projects. Applications from neighborhoods, nonprofits, and resident organizations would be reviewed by a board that included Rita Morales, Maria Santos, and 5 other community activists from around the city. The announcement made national news. Business journals called it everything from revolutionary to foolish. Conservative investors criticized Clara for abandoning her fiduciary duty. Progressive activists praised her while questioning whether real change could come from billionaire philanthropy. Clara ignored all of it and focused on making the program work. By December, they'd funded 12 projects, a cooperative housing development in the Bronx, small business incubators in Queens, a community land trust in Brooklyn that would protect affordable housing from speculation. None of it was perfect. There were arguments about priorities, disagreements about strategy, inevitable complications of trying to do something good in a system designed for profit. But it was progress. Real, measurable, meaningful progress. Clara was in her office reviewing applications when Elizabeth knocked on the door. "There's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's important." "Who is it?" "She said her name is Emma Vale." Clara's heart stuttered. "Ethan's daughter?"
She's with her grandmother. They've been waiting in the lobby for 20 minutes. Clara thought about saying no. She'd closed the book on Ethan Vale, moved on, focused on building instead of destroying. Seeing his daughter would just open old wounds. But curiosity won out. Send them up. Emma Vale was small for 6 years old, with her father's dark hair and eyes that seemed too serious for a child. Her grandmother, Ethan's mother, Clara assumed, was elegant and tired-looking, the kind of woman who'd probably been beautiful once and was now just enduring. Ms. Bennett, the grandmother extended her hand. Thank you for seeing us. I'm Catherine Vale. This is my granddaughter, Emma. Emma stayed half hidden behind her grandmother's legs, studying Clara with wary intensity. Please, sit down. Clara gestured to the chairs. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? We're fine, thank you. Catherine sat, pulling Emma onto her lap. I know this is unusual, but Emma has been asking about you for months. Since the video, since the trial, since everything happened, she wanted to meet you. Clara looked at the little girl, seeing Ethan in her features and wondering what it must be like to have your father become a public scandal while you were still learning to read. Hi, Emma, she said gently. Emma whispered something to her grandmother. She wants to know if you're really the lady from the restaurant, Catherine translated. I am. And you made Daddy go to prison? The question was direct, without judgment, just a child trying to understand why her life had fallen apart. Your dad broke the law, Clara said carefully. He lied to people and hurt families. The judge decided he had to go to prison because of that. I just helped show people the truth. Daddy said he was sorry. I know, and I think he means it. Emma studied her with those two serious eyes. Grandma says you're rich, like we used to be before Daddy went away. I am. Are you mean? The question caught Clara off guard. She thought about how to answer, how to explain complexity to a 6-year-old who just wanted simple truths. Sometimes, she said honestly, I try not to be, but sometimes I am anyway. Daddy was mean to you. Yes. That's why you were mad at him. That's part of it. But mostly I was mad because he was hurting people and not caring about it. Emma nodded slowly, like this made sense to her. Then she slid off her grandmother's lap and walked over to Clara's desk. Do you have kids? She asked. No. Why not? I've been too busy working. That's what Daddy always said too. Emma picked up a paperweight from Clara's desk, a glass sphere with the Bennett Holdings logo etched into it. He was always working. Even when he was home, he was working. Catherine stood up quickly. Emma, don't touch. It's okay. Clara gestured for her to sit back down. She's not hurting anything. Emma turned the paperweight over in her small hands, watching the way light refracted through the glass. I miss my daddy, she said quietly, even though he did bad things. Is that okay? Clara felt her throat tighten. Of course it's okay. He's your dad. You're allowed to love him even when he makes mistakes. Do you think he'll be better when he comes home? The question was so hopeful, so desperate for reassurance, that Clara couldn't bring herself to offer anything less than honesty. I don't know, she said, but I think he wants to be, and that's a start. Emma set down the paperweight carefully and walked back to her grandmother. Thank you for talking to me. You're welcome. Catherine stood, gathering her purse and taking Emma's hand. I apologize for the intrusion. I know you have no reason to care about our family after everything that's happened, but Emma's been having nightmares. The therapist thought maybe meeting you, seeing that you're a real person and not a villain from her imagination, might help. I understand. Clara walked them to the door. And for what it's worth, Mrs. Vale, I never wanted to hurt your family. I just wanted to stop the fraud. I know. Catherine's smile was sad. Ethan brought this on himself. We all know that. But Emma shouldn't have to pay for her father's mistakes. They left, and Clara stood in her office doorway watching them walk to the elevator. A little girl and her grandmother, collateral damage in a war between billionaires. Elizabeth appeared beside her. You okay? Yeah, just thinking. About how nothing is ever as simple as it seems. Clara turned back to her office. I destroyed Ethan Vale's life, sent him to prison, dissolved his company, made him a national example of corporate fraud. And I do it again because what he did was wrong and someone had to stop him. But, Elizabeth prompted, but he has a daughter who misses him. A mother who's raising that daughter alone now. Employees who lost their jobs when the company folded. Investors who lost money. Clara sat down at her desk. I didn't set out to hurt any of them, but they got hurt anyway. That's not your fault. Isn't it? I had other options. I could have forced reforms without going public, could have negotiated quietly instead of starting a media war. Maybe those families would still have their homes and Emma Vale would still have her father. Or maybe Ethan would have kept committing fraud and destroyed even more communities. Elizabeth's voice was firm. You didn't make him lie, Clara. You just held him accountable for it. There's a difference. Clara knew she was right, but it didn't make the weight any lighter. That night, she couldn't sleep. She lay in her penthouse bed watching city lights reflect off the ceiling and thinking about choices and consequences and the impossibility of doing anything meaningful without causing some kind of harm. She thought about her father, who'd built an empire by maximizing profit regardless of cost. About Ethan Vale, who'd destroyed communities in the name of progress. About herself, trying to chart a different path and discovering that even good intentions created casualties. There were no clean victories, no perfect solutions, just difficult decisions and imperfect outcomes, and the constant work of trying to do better. Around 2 a.m, Clara got up and went to her office, pulled out the applications for the Community Development Fund, and started reading through them again. A neighborhood in Harlem wanted to create a co-op that would keep longtime residents from being displaced. A group in Staten Island needed funding for a community center. A coalition in the Bronx was fighting to preserve affordable housing against developer pressure. Each application represented people trying to protect their homes, their communities, their lives. Each one needed money and support and someone willing to fight for them. Clara couldn't save everyone, couldn't fix the system or end inequality or create perfect justice, but she could help these people. Right now, with the resources she had. She started drafting approval memos. By morning, she'd greenlit 5 more projects. $100 million divided among communities that would use it to build something better than what the market would have given them. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. Elizabeth found her still working at 7 a.m., surrounded by coffee cups and application files. Did you sleep at all? At Boracay. No, but I got a lot done. Clara stood up, stretching muscles stiff from sitting too long. I want to expand the community fund. Double it, maybe triple it. However much we can allocate without tanking the company's core operations. That's going to be hundreds of millions. I know. The board will fight you. Let them. Clara's voice was certain. This is what Bennett Holdings is now. Not my father's company, not a vehicle for maximum profit extraction. A tool for actually improving lives. If board members don't like it, they can leave. Elizabeth studied her for a moment. You've changed. Since the restaurant, since everything with Vale. You're different. How? Harder. But also kinder, somehow. Like you figured out who you actually are. Clara thought about that. About the woman who'd walked into a restaurant 8 months ago, pretending to be someone powerless so she could understand the truth. About confronting Ethan Vale and starting a war and seeing it through even when it got complicated and messy and hard. I'm still figuring it out, she said. But I'm closer than I was. The board meeting happened the following week. Clara presented her proposal to expand the community fund, laid out the financial projections, and waited for the inevitable pushback. It came immediately. 3 board members argued it was fiscally irresponsible. 2 said it exceeded Clara's authority as chairwoman. 1 threatened to resign. Clara listened to all of it, then stood up. My father built this company on the idea that profit was the only thing that mattered. That efficiency meant cutting costs wherever possible, regardless of human impact. That success was measured purely in dollars. She pulled up a slide showing Bennett Holdings' portfolio before her restructuring. Projects that had displaced thousands, cut corners on safety, squeezed employees for maximum output. This is what that philosophy created. Companies that treated people like resources to be extracted. Communities that were destroyed for shareholder value. A system that made billionaires richer while everyone else struggled. Another slide. The Riverside Project, Vale's luxury condos that would never be built, and the community-led development that would rise in its place. This is what we're building instead. Not because it's more profitable in the short term, because it's right. Because we have a responsibility to use our resources to help rather than harm. She looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes. If you disagree, if you think Bennett Holdings should go back to prioritizing profit over people, you're welcome to leave. I'll buy out your shares personally, but this is the direction we're going, with you or without you. The room was silent. Then Walter Chen started clapping. Slowly at first, then Jennifer Park joined in, and then others until half the board was applauding and the other half was staring in shock. The vote passed, 8-4, with 2 abstentions. Clara walked out of that meeting feeling like she'd finally become the person she was supposed to be. Not her father's daughter, not a billionaire playing at activism, but someone actually using power for something beyond accumulation. It wasn't redemption. She'd still inherited everything, still had advantages most people couldn't imagine, still lived in a penthouse, while the families she helped lived in apartments with peeling paint and broken elevators. But it was a start. In March, a year after the restaurant confrontation, Clara went back to Le Bernardier. Not to work, not undercover. Just to eat dinner like a normal customer and see how the place had changed since Marcus Chen had been fired and the entire management team replaced with people who actually cared about their employees. The server who took her order was new, young, nervous. She poured wine without spilling a drop and thanked Clara profusely when she left a generous tip. Clara sat alone at table 7. Not the window table where everything had started, but close enough to see it, and thought about how much had changed in 12 months. Ethan Vale was in prison. His company was dissolved. Riverside was building community-led housing instead of luxury condos. Bennett Holdings was funding projects around the city that would help thousands of families stay in their homes. And Clara had learned something her father never understood. Money wasn't power. Power was choosing what to do with money. Privilege wasn't something to be ashamed of or flaunted. It was a responsibility to be handled carefully, used deliberately, deployed in service of people who didn't have it. And worth, real worth, had nothing to do with net worth. She'd been called nothing by a man who thought money made him superior. She'd spent 3 months being nothing, watching how the world treated people it considered disposable. She'd proven she wasn't nothing by using her privilege to fight for people who had none. But the real lesson wasn't about proving anything to Ethan Vale or her father's ghost or the board members who thought she was naive. It was about proving something to herself, that she could be more than an inheritance, more than lucky genetics and circumstance, more than a billionaire's daughter playing at having purpose. She could be someone who mattered, not because of her money, but because of what she chose to do with it. The server brought her check and Clara paid it, leaving another generous tip. Walked out into the March evening with the city lights reflecting off wet pavement and the sound of traffic and humanity all around her. Somewhere in Brooklyn, Rita was probably still working on the development project, fighting through permits and regulations and all the bureaucratic obstacles that made helping people harder than it should be. Somewhere in Pennsylvania, Ethan Vale was serving his sentence and maybe learning to be better than he'd been. Somewhere in Manhattan, Emma Vale was growing up without her father, carrying scars from his choices that would shape who she became. And somewhere in that same city, in apartments and subway cars and corner stores, were millions of people whose lives intersected with Clara's wealth in ways she'd never fully understand but would keep trying to make better. She couldn't fix it all, but she could fix some of it. She couldn't be perfect, but she could be better. She couldn't change the system alone, but she could use her place in it differently. Clara walked home through the city she'd lived in all her life but only recently started to truly see. She walked past doormen and delivery workers and late-night office cleaners, past the visible and invisible people who made the city function. And she thought about a question she'd asked herself 8 months ago, standing in a restaurant kitchen with her hands red from washing dishes and her feet aching from a double shift. What was her money actually doing? Now she knew. It was doing what she told it to do. For the first time, deliberately and consciously, in service of something beyond accumulation. That was worth more than any inheritance. That was worth everything.